There was a full moon in the sky, and a huge army of soldiers received a team to attack and immediately destroy the demon. The soldiers in armor fought for all their might, but the demon was too strong and they still could not defeat him. The demon applied his abilities, and the soldiers had not just since his power destroyed everyone who came across in the way. The warriors did not lose hope and were going to stand until the very end, but from every minute, one of them went to the next world. After some time, the demon still defeated everyone because it turned out to be too strong. The girl stood opposite, and all that she wanted to know is why a person did this. She did not understand why the guy made a deal with the devil and betrayed everyone. The guy stood very confidently and at the same time did not particularly express any emotions. After a few minutes of silence, he still decided to say that everything was generally the matter of them. The guy decided to add more, that he was just not betraying anyone, but they betrayed him. The girl got angry and ordered not to say such nonsense, and it is better to honestly answer when he decided to this act. Suddenly something became something to happen, and all that the guy managed to say that it was only the beginning, and he would definitely return. A bright flash blinded everything around, and in the system window it was written that the first part of Inner Lunatic was completed with a total score of 27. The guy who was sitting at the computer playing the game when he saw the result, he considered such a result quite good. He was again able to get quite a few items and even able to complete a couple of secret tasks and therefore satisfied with the result. He understood, especially if you take into account the fact that he would go to the next month, the game was perfectly. The guy remembered how 2 years ago he learned terrible news from the doctor. The doctor very much asked the guy whose name is Uchan not to panic and listen to him carefully. After he found out about his diagnosis, he decided to contact another clinic, hoping that everyone would refute. Chan, despite hope, heard from the doctors that their test results brought their own diagnosis. The guy was asked to take medications that the doctor prescribed to him, and they will be able to alleviate his discomfort. The guy was stunned and did not expect anything like it, and he no longer saw the point. When he became very bad, he took medications, but they practically ceased to alleviate his strong discomfort. The guy spent all his time in a computer chair for games, and suddenly realized that 2 years had passed. He felt sick sharply and began to understand that very soon he would go to the next world. Chan tried not to think about it because he understood that constant thoughts about it would only aggravate his condition. The guy saw that another notification from the hospital came to his mobile phone that wrote that the hospitalization of Chan was approved. This was far from the first message, but the guy believed that all this was because of the fact that no one would remember about him anyway, because he and his loved ones do not even have close people. He was not going to go anywhere in the current state, despite many leaflets lying on his table. These leaflets were either with his diagnosis or a proposal from the hospital to be hospitalized. The guy could not stand emotionally and dare all this from his computer table. Chan was distracted from his thoughts due to the fact that a proposal was displayed on the computer to start a new game. He decided all the same to go through the game again. After confirmation of the beginning of the new game, it was necessary to introduce the desired nickname, and the guy thought about whom he would like to create this time. The guy decided that he would take the ability to sensitivity to melee and still own the sword with martial arts. After that, he saw that it turned out to be a fine for the choice of 2 unique skills, and in order to avoid this fine, it was necessary to reduce the number of unique skills to 1. Therefore, the guy indicated negative illness in the column. Chan believed that since he had little time in his real world and let his character be the same. The guy was invited to start a game with the current character settings, and he considered such a question ridiculous. A moment later, something strange began to happen, and Chan could not understand what was the matter. He could not stay on his chair and fell to the floor thinking that this was still his end. At this time, a window was displayed on the computer that stated that the creation of the character was started and the character's name was forcibly changed. After this notification, synchronization began, and soon it was written that the character was created. Chan gradually began to recover after what had happened, and at the very beginning it was hard for him to even just move his fingers. The guy woke up lying on the bed and the first minutes did not understand what happened at all. He tried to understand where he was, but after he looked around, he realized that he clearly had already seen all this somewhere. Chan got out of bed and decided to more carefully examine the room, and accurately became convinced that he had already been here. The guy, only after looking in the mirror and saw his reflection, began to guess what apparently he was transferred to the game. He saw a guy named Nox in the mirror and found out in him the main villain in the game in which he himself played recently. The guy did not think that the final phrase of Nox von Reinhafer I would return, and this only the beginning belonged to this, and the nose was the Lord of Darkness in the game. His family was tightly connected with the lunatic of the most famous criminal organization in the world. Nox was the youngest son of 5 children Reinhafer. In his family generations, all the children were masters of martial arts and magic. Only this guy turned out to be defective. In order to succeed, the Nox concluded an agreement with the devil from the Forgotten Kingdom, and thanks to which he became the Lord of Darkness and the main villain of the game Inner Lunatic. Chan simply could not believe that he could somehow become a Nox because it was incredible. The guy read in the system window the main information in which the full name of Nox von Reinhafer was indicated, and that he was the age of 14 with the race of man. Darkness was indicated by the main elements of the guy, but without titles. He was delighted as a real child because he had his own status window. The guy looked closely and was surprised because he, as it turned out, had very weak characteristics and his endurance was just equal to 2. He was also surprised by the fact that he had many negative skills, and after he looked more carefully, he realized that these were the same characteristics that he had previously given the character. Chan began to understand that his life was short there. Apparently, it would be short in here. When he created the character, he simply adhered to only one desire. The guy wanted only one, that the hero was just like him in real life. Chan wanted it to be a character who had nothing to lose and that there was no one to love this character. But the most important thing is that he was sick and soon go to the next world. The guy, of course, could not even think that everything could turn into this way. Chan suddenly noticed one message not read in the system window, and it interested him. The guy in the message read the question of where it was asked how now it was worth contacting him, or rather, Yu-chan or Nox. Yu-chan was the name that the guy received from his parents, and he never even saw them. The guy began to guess that it was most likely who was the one who transferred him here, or perhaps it was someone from his past. Chan saw that another message came in which it was written that maybe the guy doesn't remember him, but he still had to tell him something. The next thing Chan read was that he had been following him for a very long time, or rather for 2 whole years. Chan all the same every time, and again returned to him again and again, and therefore the stranger decided once again to greet him, and wrote with his return. The guy could not understand what return is talking about and that it all means. Chan began to guess what apparently was not in his former world. This place apparently now is his reality to which he should adapt. The guy began to be angry because of the fact that many things could not understand, and he came another message in which it was said that at the moment the stranger could not tell him much more. The same stranger wrote that he still really wants to help the guy. He advised him to enter the Elden Academy and train intensely there in order to gain experience. Also, try to follow the original story as accurately as possible, and the truth over time will reveal by itself. On this, all the messages ended and Chan was still trying to somehow get to find out more information, and his attempts were not successful. The guy tried to calm down and at least somehow collect all his thoughts in order to understand what's what. Firstly, he understood for sure that he was Reborn, the main antagonist of the game, Inner Lunatic. Chan remembered that he could not deviate very much from the original plot, although he understood that it doesn't matter how he actually could interpret, because the result is ultimately the same will still be the only departure to the other world. The guy understood that the inner lunatic was possible and became his reality, but this does not mean that he could abandon his lost memories. By and large, it was absolutely anyway at what cost he would adhere to the main story, because having restored his memory, the guy will be able to understand what he should do in this world. Chan wanted only one to survive at all costs and was ready for this for a lot. The guy was ready to become a real villain because he had no other choice. He understood that if you think about it, there wasn't any particular difference between this life and the old, really. The guy never forgot the moment when 2 years ago he found out that there were big health problems. Each past minute brought him closer to an end, and the guy lived all his life in fear of waiting for his end. Unless the settings in the world have changed in all this, which the guy knows like his 5 fingers. The guy turned to the system window in order to find out the number today and read the answer that today was the 4th of February, 1812 years. He realized that before entering the academy remained only 1 year. Chan realized that he had not so much time left and in this case decided to try something. The guy decided to start 28th attempts at perfect passage. He decided to go beyond his room but holding the door handle of something. The system window stated that due to a dangerous illness, his wrist inflammation of the 1st degree developed, and treatment and sufficient rest were required. This all meant that the negative characteristic feature was activated. He did not understand what was happening with his body at all, and he did not expect that he would be so weak. The guy, because of his thoughts, did not notice the maid and ran into that in the corridor. The maid, due to the collision, broke a large number of dishes and smoothed slightly. The girl was not immediately, but when she saw and realized that she was faced with young Mr. Nox, was very scared. Chana was familiar with her face, and looking closely, he examined brown hair and light orange eyes. The guy recognized in this maid a girl named Ron. The girl was scared and began to ask for forgiveness from the young master for falling in his way. Chan remembered that this girl was a secondary character and that she dissolved rumors about Nox, and he did not know any information more about her. The guy looked at the girl and what she had an innocent angelic face and could not believe that this particular character slandered Nox, let him be a villain. The vat leaned over the girl and said that this time he forgives her, but warned that she was better not to allow such situations. The maid thanked for the kindness of her young master and promised that henceforth would be more accurate. The rest of the employees froze with misunderstanding and great surprise on their faces. The guy suddenly realized the reason because for everyone he had the one who was not all in order with his head, and slightly angry with what kind of life the Nox lived. The maid became curious where the young master gathered in such an early. The guy simply replied that he was heading to the training room, and thereby caused even more emotions at the staff. They all, without hiding their surprise, looked at the guy and did not understand what was happening with that early morning. The guy, unexpectedly for the girl, called her with him, but to himself only thought that he needed to survive at all costs. He was already able to feel the feeling when you were on the verge, and therefore did not want to experience it anymore. Chan understood in order to survive him to get used to new circumstances as soon as possible. He thought over and weighing everything began to realize that he still has every chance. The guy knew that as a person who went through the game 27 times, he knows all her pitfalls and this could play into his hands. He saw a system window in which the game of Inner Lunatic was written. It was a game that narrated about the confrontation between angels and demons in the Empire. This game has collected many fans around the world. The biggest feature of the Inner of the Lunatic was a huge selection of settings that allowed the players to choose various signs. The characteristics of low ranks like Ordinary and Talented could choose as much as you like, but unique skills could only be used once. The guy understood that with unique skills to get to the top would not be difficult. Chan already had 2 of them, and it was only good for him. He knew that in this game was the concept of penalty characteristics, when the selected skill exceeds personal limits. Thanks to the advantage of the system that analyzes them and selects a suitable skill, you can choose 2 unique ones. It was the skill of owning a sword and martial arts. However, on the other hand, there was sensitivity to mana, which increased and thereby allowed to more effectively apply spells. The guy realized that he had a large selection of useful skills, and this could not but rejoice. For example, he thought about the privilege of the protagonist, a vision that opened the owner of the statuses of other characters. Or is it possible acting that made it possible to behave naturally in any situation? The guy understood that the cold mind in the battle helps to keep calm and a clear look at this situation. However, there was only one problem. He also knew the fact that all this was accompanied by negative features, which was dangerously sick of the worst of the possible. Chan read in his system window about the set of his diseases and understood that he was directly walking, and any hospital was clearly crying for him. It was known that players with anemia without warming spells could not step on cold surfaces. People who had weak immunity fainted at least once per chapter. Chan perfectly understood that he did not particularly have a chance, but for some reason it only had fun, and with his behavior he slightly scared the maid. He decided that whatever it was there, he would solve problems as they arrive. The maid drew attention that their slightly strange walk still led to the training room. Only the girl did not know whether the young master would actually be engaged. Chan opened the door to the room he needed and decided that he would first try to figure out weakness. The player from birth was awarded to be weak, and therefore the development rate is halved, and the resistance is also reduced by half. The guy first of all wanted to get rid of this weakness that only complicated everything to him. Chan perfectly understood that no matter how much he thought, but unfortunately the conclusion would be only one that nothing good awaits him. The guy completely reread absolutely the whole story, and this did not particularly help him. Chan came to the same conclusion and, as it were, did not try, but the result was still the same. The guy did not try, but could not wave the sword more than 10 times. But weakness only exacerbated the situation of his affairs. Chan looked around and saw that the choice of weapons in this training room was very decent. It was all because the family of the Reinhofer family stood on the swords, and when it concerned the Reinhofers, there were a lot of words suitable for their description. Chan was aware that the best of them was the House of the Blade and the House of Darkness. They were awarded such a nickname not just like that, but all because of the skills of owning a sword and using black magic to crush enemies. This was the commanding blade that was also known as the Ruthless Blade of Darkness. It was instructed that the head of the family transfers this blade to his receiver, namely the future chapter, and the tradition of transferring the blade to this day. Chan reflected on his benefit and began to understand that in addition to the skillful possession of the sword, the noble family gave many advantages. One of these advantages was money, and the guy considered it just excellent. Everyone knew that the Reinhafer family was one of the most noble families in history. Chan knew that the members of this family were very rich, and at least it could benefit him. This meant that even their very useless younger son would never have to work to survive. The guy considered the most pleasant that Nox's father did not care at all where and why the Nox spends his money. Nox guy was not the same as a character, but just the youngest son of a noble family. In any case, the essence of the personality of Nox was absolutely understandable, and he himself was about to squeeze out the maximum from this person. The guy felt more fatigue, and it was more difficult for him to fight this with this minute. He already began to think that while Ron was ready to fulfill his requests, he could not even run. A few minutes earlier, Ron prepared everything necessary for the young master. The girl informed the guy that a wooden sword of a towel in the water was already ready for a young master. Rona could not believe that the master was seriously going to train. The guy, after making sure that no one nearby was, told the girl to approach him. The maid, due to the fact that she was very excited, only began to be more afraid and did not understand what the master wanted from her. He did not particularly pay attention to the strange words of the girl and still ordered her to carefully listen to him. The guy who quietly told the maid in the ear and the girl agreed to his words, but could not believe that the master was ready to spend such money. She decided to answer the guy that everything he was now informed, she considered it a non-priest. The young gentleman was not going to argue with her and therefore ordered that he just shut up and do what they say to her. The girl ran out of the room to fulfill the assignment given to him and thought that this guy did not change at all for all the time. The guy did not know how quickly Ron would be able to cope with everything, but in theory by tomorrow, everything should be ready. He understood that he did not need to get rid of all this and raise his endurance. The guy did not expect that everything would be so deplorable. While he was thinking about all this, he missed the moment when he approached him and the man greeted Mr. Knox. The guy did not expect that the main butler named Rudvel de Ernark would appear in front of him. This butler was one of the most important property of the Reinhof's property, and he was clearly not what could be easily dealt with as I would like to. He was also an advisor to Knox's father, as well as the head of the Reinhofer family. The butler was an advisor to Theo I Reinhofer himself, and this said a lot about itself. The guy perfectly understood that he would have not been at all with this person at all. He knew that in general, this butler should not have anything if, of course, the man did not notice that something was suspicious. The guy knew that just at the moment he could well resolve the situation. He applied a positive skill of acting in order to ask the butler in an imperative voice why he does not serve the head of the family, but for some reason is here. The man replied that because he received several orders from the chapter, and here is just to share the news with the guy. The butler said that he was ordered to convey that the young master joined today's dinner. Chan understood that he knew absolutely nothing about this family and tried to understand why this joint dinner. The guy asked the man to convey that today, unfortunately, he could not join dinner. Chan was wondering why the head of the family to call for dinner of a young master. The butler answered everything due to the fact that the lady of the family Stillmer visited them. Mrs. Stillmer apparently wants to go through a nightly training. The man added that if suddenly a young master does not join dinner, the head of the family will be very unhappy. The butler looked carefully at the young master and said that he himself is not his own today. The guy asked to explain what he meant. The man replied that just before the young master had never attracted swords, and today for some reason the master himself decided to come to the training room. The butler was too interesting to know why the guy decided to come here. The guy looked very serious and decided to immediately clarify something in order to avoid further questions. He said that even if a man is the main butler, he decided to warn that he would not even think of crossing the road to his young master. The guy added what he is doing, what intentions he has, this man should not worry. The guy believed that only he would decide what he would do and what exactly to do. The butler immediately apologized for such inappropriate questions. After this slightly stressed conversation, the person realized that he still noticed something and decided that the head of the family should be reported about this. The guy, when he was left alone, was very excited because he did not expect that this could happen. He was glad that at least he was not activated by obsession, otherwise he did not know what consequences could arise. The guy remembered that the butler announced the arrival of the young lady of the family Stilliner, and his news was just as excited. He did not understand what the girl here really forgot and what surprises to expect from her now. One of the guys sitting at the table after they saw the young master immediately began to mock him, naming him not distant, and that now he will not be able to enjoy the meal due to his presence. The guy did not react to these shots from his person and continued to sit silently at the table. The twins Hartees and Alan mocked the guy and thought that he apparently still regrets that he got into this family. The guys could not believe that the guy still dares and decide to appear at all. They discussed that rumors about his glances with the maid reached them and considered the guy simply hopeless. The young master continued to sit in silence as before, but to himself, he thought that he was not entirely clear to the behavior of the twins, because he did nothing to them at all. The head of the Theo Auns Reinhofer entered the dining room, and looking at the room he realized that everything seemed to be assembled. The man also entered the waist of Styliner, who greeted everyone and said that everyone was glad to see. The head decided to inform everyone that the young mistress of the Styliner family arrived in order to undergo a training of knights and is still in their estate. The man asked the young mistress to feel at home and added that everything was happy with her. The guy immediately recognized in this girl the heroine inner lunatic named Sylvia. He perfectly remembered that this character opposed the future villain Knox, and it was this girl that very soon he would send his sword to the next world. The chapter could not help but notice that the Knox decided to join them all the same, and since everyone was gathered for men, offered to start a meal. The Gemini turned to the father because they believed that it was already time to finally make a decision. The guys wanted to know which of them would go to the academy. Eldane and Knox heard something familiar to himself. The chapter was considering all a few minutes. He decided that all the same his sons were right, and it was time to resolve this issue. Everyone knew that the Academy of Eldane was the most important location in all of Inner Lunatic. The students of this academy faced various dangers and fought with demons. On this, the story of Inner Lunatic was based on this. The guy understood that he had to get to the Aldine Academy at all costs. He also understood the fact that in addition to following the original story, it is necessary to get allies. The head had no doubt that his sons were aware that the Academy of Eldane received only 3 candidates from the family. The man explained that in this way they controlled the influence of the nobles. Everyone knew that 2 eldest sons had already arrived from the family. Based on this, only one person can go to the Academy on behalf of the Reinhofer family. The Knox, before acquiring the allies, was going to do not become precisely to those who will go to the Academy. Having considered everything for himself, he still decided to follow the traditions of the family. The guy could not remain silent and said that, on the basis of them all this, the the father would arrange a battle between his sons. The man was surprised because he did not expect that the Nox would be the first to react. The chapter added that the battle will pass in a month and then they will choose a representative of the family following the results of the battle that will be held in the training room. The Gemini advised Nox not to twitch once again so as not to disgrace, because they were sure that their brother had no chance to survive against them. The guy simply answered that they can say a lot and well, but who will celebrate? Everyone will find out after the battle. One of the brothers got angry because the Nox apparently thought that he was able to win. Nox understood that this duel was another test that he needed to go in order to get to the academy. The guy was not going to listen to all these insults addressed to the twins. The guy declared loudly and confidently to everyone at the table that he would become those who will go to the academy. The head could not hide his surprise from such a confident statement by his son Nox. The Gemini did not hide rage on their faces and were not going to leave such impudence unpunished. The girl was touched by such a picture and said that apparently the young master was confident in his abilities. The guy realized that apparently he attracted her attention, but of course it was done very in vain. The head of sitting in his office was talking with the butler and realized that, as he said to him, something in Nox all the same changed. The butler was the same opinion and believed that these changes were very visible. The head of the family thought that if he himself personally would not have witnessed what happened today, then he would never believe his words. The husband couldn't understand why the Nox suddenly changed so. The man hoped just his son could not be obsessed with a demon and tried to drive such thoughts away. The head of the family believed how you did not have attention to his boyfriend in any case. He attracted but still ordered his butler to continue to follow the Nox. All the servants were simply perplexed because the young gentleman was again in the training room. The maids understood that the competition of the guys would take place in a month, and apparently the whole reason was in this. The maids often watched the young master and did not understand why the guy only does what he was running. The guy could not understand why he hears every word of their words because he could not remember that he had unique hearing skills. The system window reported that Nox's endurance level rose only to 1/10, and this was the main reason because the guy constantly ran. His main problem was his weak endurance. The main condition for owning a sword in martial arts was the level of endurance of at least the 4th. The guy tried to achieve this particular result. He knew that it was possible to easily use this skill if the guy Nox was so weak. The curse of weakness unfortunately did not take anywhere from him. These training tired him very much and took all his strength, but the guy did not see just another way out. After a month of persistent training, he managed to raise the level of endurance to only 1/900th, but this unfortunately was still not enough. The weakness of which was said so awarded reduced all his progress. He saw that even after such a run, his level of endurance increased only by 1/10. To everything else, the consequences after a serious illness made themselves felt. The guy perfectly understood that, unlike others, he would have to apply 4 times more effort. The guy's thoughts were interrupted by the maid who reported that she brought everything about he asked her. He was delighted as the girl eventually coped faster than he expected and hoped that finally everything would go as it should. Different ingredients were laid out on the table, such as tears of fairies, of the memoirs of the poison of the 3-headed gorgon, as well as the heart of the golem and the scroll of the rapid growth of endurance. With the help of all this, he was going to reach the 4th level. He was already thought out and the guy was going to just take advantage of knowledge to solve his problem. The maid could not restrain her curiosity and asked the young master why he needed all this. She decided to clarify that with poison it was worth being extremely sharp and other things ordinary people tried to always avoid. The girl thought that 1 sweat was possible to do. The young gentleman replied that all those people simply do not know how to properly use all these ingredients. The guy did not hesitate anymore and decided to drink just one of these ingredients. The girl froze in surprise and the whole shock was reflected on her face from the act of a young master. She could not understand why Mr. Nox voluntarily decided to drink what could send him to the next world. The guy at that moment saw that the system window reported that he accepted the poison of the 3-headed gorgon, and thereby the level of his health is temporarily increasing by 1.5 times, and the exact time was written before he went to the next world. The girl shouted that she would immediately call here the main butler, but the young master ordered that to stay in place. At that moment, he took advantage of another ingredient, and it was the heart of golem. The maid asked the guy to stop and screamed that this was all not edible. The system window reported that it was he who used, and it was written that soon he would gradually begin to petrify. A message came that the secret recipe was activated due to the interaction of the ingredients he used, and the guy was very delighted with this news. The heart of the golem was generally used to turn people into fossils or to quickly strengthen their protection. There were also moments when it was used to create artificial golems. Only far from many people knew that as soon as the poison of the 3-headed gorgon entered this game, then a negative skill. and in this case it was a very weakness of the Nox automatically disappeared. The guy considered this unequivocally his deserved victory because this curse of weakness was still removed. He had to take the last step. The girl, grabbing her head from excitement for her young master, hoped that he was in perfect order. The maid, due to strong fear, even closed her eyes because she was sure that after everything drunk and eaten, a young gentleman would go to the next world. The young master, after a moment, surprised the girl even more, took the bottle with the tears of the fairy of memoirs and poured it all over, and thereby stopped the process of petrification. The guy knew that the tears of the fairies of memories interact with the heart of Golem. He could not help but admit that, of course, at the moment he had a rather strange sensation. The system notification read that the secret recipe was activated, and the user temporarily receives the gift of progress. As planned, until endurance reaches the 5th level, the progress indicators will now double. The guy was all very pleased, but he had to take another step. He took this step and took advantage of the sweat of the rapid growth of endurance, and now the growth of his endurance should double. The guy thought that he still managed to remove the curse, and now the blessing of progress limited the defabs from the disease. He also took advantage of the sweatshirt, and his current pace of progress should be several times higher than the progress of ordinary people. He understood that now his endurance should increase much faster. The maid rushed to the guy, experiencing her young master was all right. The girl said that she was very worried since he behaved somehow strange, but the guy was not going to explain anything to her, and ordered her to immediately bring him a towel. The young gentleman thought that since the curse was already removed, and perhaps he should now behave softer with her, he decided to soften a little, and smiling at the girl answered that he was in perfect order. The girl still doubted a little and therefore offered the young master to call the main butler, and also believed that the guy should have a little rest. Nox replied that no one needed to call and repeated that everything was fine with him and nothing to worry about. The maid asked what the young master was going to do now, and he replied that in his plans to continue to run further. In the courtyard, one could notice a strange picture as a young master continued to run, and behind him on the heels too was the most maida servant with a towel in her hands. The waste watched this whole picture and did not understand why such a weak person to take part in the battle against the brothers. The maid Emma decided to make a remark of Milady about the fact that it was generally indecent to burn the eyes of the youngest son of the Rheinhafer's youngest son. The woman added that it was a bad tone, but Milady was a slightly different opinion. The waste still stood on his own and did not understand why all this was. All the youngest son did not own the sword, but only did that he was running in circles. The girl was also surprised by the fact that the knights of the Rheinhafers volunteered to help the guy with training, but he dared to refuse. She could not understand what the young master counts on, because exactly a month later he would simply be destroyed. The waste had no doubt and was completely sure that everything would be so, and generally thought that this was not her business and should not even think about it. The girl turned around and hurried somewhere, only told her maid Emma that she would return soon. The waste went to the guy and introduced herself to offer that. The guy looked at the girl in surprise and did not expect at all, and even no longer wanted her presence next to him. The young master recalled that the girl had already presented himself a little earlier, and said that it was better to answer why she came here. The waste did not understand why the guy behaves so coldly with her, and clearly speaks without much desire. The girl thought that rather because of her beauty, and apparently the young master was simply struck on the spot. The waste looked carefully at the guy and said that she came where to ask something. She was really interested in whether he was so confident in his victory and therefore agreed to take part in the battle. The girl also told the guy that running would not help him, and thought that he did not even have a small chance of a positive outcome. The maid heard these words mentally with a girl in solidarity. The waste added that if a young master of course asks her for help, then she will gladly help him. The guy immediately replied that he would probably refuse such an offer since he was not interested, and told the girl in a rude form to leave him alone. The waste clearly did not expect such a rude refusal and was surprised that the young master dared to talk to her so much. The maid guy also believed that he should not behave like that for the simple reason that girls do not like when they talk to them in this tone. The waste ordered the guy to forget about her words because he may not even hope for her help. The girl leaving specifically strongly touched that hand and said that she was now anyway, and let her do what she wanted. The guy unfortunately understood that now everything was only more complicated for him. He looked at the skills of the waste and from which side he would not look, but the girl was clearly very talented. He knew that in inner lunatics, strong men had endurance of the 4th level, and the waste had incredible endurance indicators. The guy saw that the girl had the 6th level of endurance. The guy understood that of course it was nothing compared to the 3 great masters of the continent sword. This was also not in comparison with one of the 4 great magicians. However, he realized that this girl has every chance to rise to their level. The guy could not help but notice that the waste with his element of fire was already able to destroy a couple of 3 demons. The magic of the fire element of which was used by the waste was able to arouse a white flame, and with the help of which in the future and send the Nox obsessed with the demon to the other world. The guy understood that if he turns the waste into his ally, then the story could change too much. That is why he needed to find a way to follow the original story as accurately as possible, but to avoid destruction. He could not understand whether it was possible to be in good relations with the person who would send him to the next world. A month later, the guys trained in full swing, and the twins considered the talent of the waist simply incredible because the girl grabbed absolutely everything on the fly. For them, in principle, it was all expected and did not see anything special new. After all, this girl was the pride of the Stilliner family, and she fully justified it. The girl was good and very confident in herself, but she achieved all this confidence with her own labor. For some reason, she decided to think about whether she could become a real knight in the future. It was known that the knight should in no case be greedy, and it was important to remain modest. The knight still had to sacrifice himself to serve in the name of the highest good. In order to be called worthy, the knight was also obliged to master the art of owning a sword and shape. The waist did not understand how the Nox was going to defeat the brothers, who trained and prepared for years. The next day, two guys opposite each other stood in a place allotted for a duel. The whole family gathered in this place in order to observe this event. One of the viewers was the first wife of Theophasilia, who looked very serious. The head of the family decided to ask Rodell, in his opinion, the result of this duel will be. The man did not have time to answer because they asked everyone below. For everyone, it was announced that the official duel in which the worthy to enter the Academy Eldane begins. The guy waited for this day and was ready to lay out in full, but to achieve the result he needed. The head still wanted to hear the opinions of his senior butler and therefore asked the question again. Rodville replied that taking into account the last battles of the young Mr. Allen, then the victory will definitely be behind him. The head of the family added that he agrees too. The senior butler could not believe that the chapter really had a different opinion on this. The man of course noticed that the young master really changed, but nevertheless he could not believe that he could win. After all, it was just egregious injustice, and this simply could not happen. Rodville went the path of becoming a knight behind the head of the family and knew that the art of owning a blade could be deceiving, but the essence was still banally simple. The man realized that how much do not train, how much do not honing your ability to handle your sword, but there was only one single lever. It was a lever capable of turning everything in your direction and putting towering on his knees. There was a wall that was simply impossible to climb, and this is an incomprehensible talent to the mind. Rodville did not know whether the young Mr. Knox was gifted with such a talent. The head of the family believed that there was such a probability after all. In the end, in this guy there were genes of the Reinhoffes family, and therefore, in his opinion, there is still a chance that the youngest son was born with the talent of Emperor Swords. The guy was upset because the possession of a sword and martial arts was not activated. He did not know where he managed to spoil karma so much, although he had high performance of good luck. He was upset that he was not able to increase his endurance to 4. The guy saw that his endurance indicators grew by 1/10. Rona, out of breath, decided to clarify with the young master whether it was necessary to run with him. He replied that of course it is, certainly, because if she is not able to take care of him so well. The guy handed the girl a towel and said that this was another assignment for her. Knox suddenly looked at Ron carefully and thought that the girl should have good endurance in theory. The guy decided to spy on the system window and saw that Rona had endurance of 4.5. The maid thus was stronger than the average statistical man. Her indicators with which she began higher than that, he spent a whole month, and it was annoying. Rona decided to report that the evening on the street, and the master should have a rest in front of tomorrow's duel. The guy suddenly thought that the last days flew very quickly, and he practically did not notice, but he already had a cut. One of the twins on the day of the duel decided to inform Knox that it's not too late to give up too late. The guy considered his younger brother a real shame of their family, but still he thought that he could not afford to fight with him at full strength. Knox replied that his brother's expression speaks the opposite. The twin, after that all the same, admitted that the Knox is right, and he just really wants to impress the daughter of the Stilliner family, and he was sure that he would help. Knox answered his brother that I am not at all sure that the girl is such a good choice. He saw at the same moment that Alan's endurance indicators were 8, and Knox understood that his brother could not win the usual methods. The judge decided to declare for all those present that a duel is declared open for the possibility of entering the Academy Eldon. The man called the Knox and Allen that they would take the results as they would be and decided to add that the objections would not be accepted. The guy at that moment felt nervous because if he now loses now, then everything would be finished on this. Therefore, he believed that it was necessary to restore his memories as soon as possible in order to find out who sent him that letter. He understood that all this rush was simply because in a year he would go to the next world. The guys with their weapons in their hands stood opposite each other and heard the team. The competition began. Alan immediately rushed to the attack and the guy with difficulty but still managed to evade her. The elder brother noted a good block of the guy, but this did not stop him, and therefore Alan began the attack on a new one. For Knox, it was the most annoying but at the same time the most basic concept of the entire inner lunatic. He perfectly understood that if he now loses, then to great regret there would be no way further. Knox also understood that if he still managed to win, then in the future he would already be invincible. Alan began to be angry because he thought that for his victory he would be enough for him and one of his attacks. The guys were both assertive and no one was going to give way to a friend and all because they both pursued the same goal. The first wife of the head of the family, Fitzel, believed that it was very stupid to pay attention to the changes in the youngest, because she had no doubt that the one who would go to the Alder Academy would be her son. The woman was calm and confident in her thoughts and watched how Alan confidently goes into her goal. Facilia looked at the duel, but at the same time she did not externally express any emotions. The head of the family also followed every action of the guys, and the man was upset that the guy was capable of only this, because he was so hooked in the night that he was looking forward to this duel. The butler believed that it was time to stop this duel. The senior butler was worried that if everything further and continues, then the young master had a long recovery after this duel. The chapter believed that the Gemini, Alan, and Hearts were certainly talented, but unfortunately not enough. Compared to his first son, Garen, these guys were very weak. That person had the ability to keep everything by control in the compartment with the incredible force of which he could suppress the opponent. It was a dark sword of domination. It was necessary a person who could be conveyed, but apparently not in the near future. The head of the family all the same decided that it was time to finish it all and was about to stop the duel, but they did not give him this as it happened. The indicators of the young master grew up another 10th, but this did not end there. A moment later, the guy came a notification that the skill of owning a sword in martial arts was activated. Alan looked at his brother and could not understand why he suddenly began to smile. In addition to the skill, Nox also activated the unique skill of the Time Lord. He had already heard somewhere that every unique and talented had his own time, and apparently now the moment has come. The guy drew attention to the fact that everything around was very noticeable due to the fact that the skill was activated that allows you to slow down everything that fell into the field of his vision. Thanks to this, the movement of his opponent became much slower, and the guy, in turn, could continue to move as quickly. Based on all this, it will now be difficult for him to squeeze the maximum out of this bonus. Nox understood that since the skill of owning a sword in martial arts at the moment was currently activated, then everything was already a foregone conclusion. The guy immediately rushed to the attack on Alan, and now all his movements were significantly different from those that were some time ago. Nox now no longer doubted and was sure that in this duel, he would definitely be the winner. He definitely could knock out the weapon from Alan and thereby angry the twin. Everything that happened to the guy now seemed much more fun than before. Nox understood that self-confidence was good, but still he believed that it was impossible to relax in any case. He knew that such a bonus lasts only 5 minutes and no matter how, but in any case he needs to meet the timing. Nox decided to inform Alan that he fought with him before that was not in full force. Now looking at his older brothers considered those very boring and not so interesting. He already wanted to finish all this as soon as possible and invited the brothers to attack him immediately together. The Gemini could not believe that all their younger brother speaks quite seriously. Nox decided to immediately turn to his father in order to allow him to fight simultaneously with 2 brothers. The chapter was surprised no less, but did not allow himself to show any emotions on his face. The waste observed everything that was happening a little aside and did not understand what this guy was doing at all. The chapters noticed that the guy's energy changed a lot and realized that he still had ace in his sleeve, and therefore the man decided that he was still worth it to be held with the stop of this duel and observe more. That is why the man all the same gave his approval to this battle where 2 will participate against 1. Facilia jumped to her feet and tried to stop the head of the family, but she did not work out so. At the same moment, the children were announced on the beginning of their duel on the basis of which the winner will be able to go to the academy. The twins were very outraged that the Nox dared to humiliate them in front of his father. The Nox was assembled and ready to attack, and the guy looked very confident and collected. The twins decided not to lose more than a minute, but to put their younger brother in place and therefore rushed to the attack. Nox very masterfully blocked the blows of his brothers, as it were, they did not try. Gemini in the entrance of the battle discussed their new tactics to drive their brother into a corner. At that moment, the Nox read in the system window that, thanks to the activation of the bonus skill, the time leverage was able to increase. The guy realized that the skill of owning a sword grew, and this was a wonderful news for him, because now he could see a sword. Thanks to this, he managed to hurt one of the twins, and it was very painful. The waste from what she saw could not sit more in place, and all the emotions were pronounced on her face. Nox could easily read the emotions of all people who watched this duel. All of them saw a misunderstanding how such a family shame could suddenly change. The twins were also surprised and did not expect anything like that. And the Nox suddenly told them that he warned the brothers so that they were not distracted. The battle continued further, but with a vengeance, since each of them wanted to win, and as soon as possible. Nox perfectly understood that now at the stake, there is all his well-being in the game, but in addition to this, he still turned out to be and is very fun to fight on the swords. Everyone who watched the battle could not stop wondering what they saw. A few minutes later, at all what no one expected, and one of the twins, due to the attack of his younger brother, could not stand on his feet. The brothers breathed heavily, trying to recover at least a little, and looked in surprise at Nox. Nox saw that the action of his time, the time of the time was over, and the guy understood that that was all. Fitzilia began to worry very much for the twins, hoping that her sons were all right. Nox turned to the judge with the question of whether the winner in this duel was already chosen and heard a positive answer. A moment later, it was announced for everyone that young Mr. Knox von Reinhofer wins in this duel. Knox suddenly sharply felt strong weakness and did not expect that it would happen so quickly. Due to the sharp weakness, he could no longer even hold the sword in his hands, and now he did not know how to be next to him. Knox decided that he needed to hide as soon as possible from all these eyes. So far, no one suspected anything. The waist looked at the guy very carefully, and the behavior of the young master seemed very strange to her. The girl decided that she would definitely need to talk to him. Knox left the duel hall, and already when he was left alone, he could calmly exhale and stopped hiding his condition. The guy was very bad and all because he apparently just used the skill for too long. The bonus skill Master of Time had one big drawback, and apparently the guy received a return. He knew that this was possible after the skill limit was exceeded. The system window stated that for the excess of the time of use of the Time Lord of the Time, the user received return, because of which his life expectancy was reduced by 2 days and 17 hours. It was impossible to return the lifetime that was removed. Knox was glad that it all overtook him, at least not with witnesses, because if at least anyone was, all his admission to the academy would certainly be covered. The guy suddenly felt that in this room he was no longer alone, but he did not expect that this particular person came to him. The waist was heading to the guy and, looking at his strange behavior, decided to clarify Lee wounded. Knox began to be angry because of all the possible people this girl came to him. The guy knew only one thing, that he should never allow the waist to find out about the return. Knox had not yet had time to say anything even, but the girl was already ahead of and asked how such a weak man was able to win a duel against two strong rivals. The waist looked carefully at Knox and decided to explain herself after all. Apparently, he did not understand her correctly. The girl just a month ago saw a guy who never once held a sword in his hands, because that day the Knox only clumsily waved a wooden sword. She was sure that such a person had no chance of victory. The waist decided that the whole thing is inborn talent, and therefore was obliged to find out how the guy managed to arouse him and develop to such a state. The girl was only embarrassed by the fact that after the battle was finished and the guy was left alone, it looked like that very strange. The waist did not understand what was happening and why the Knox was in such a terrible state. The guy with his talent and his uniqueness was able to win over the brothers, but he looked so sad at the same time. The waist now knew exactly that the guy was not such a hopeless loser as the rumors assured. The girl was only now able to realize that the Knox all this time went out of the skin for this victory. The waist saw that Knox was bad and wanted to help him at least somehow, but the guy's reaction was unexpected for her. Knox bounced from the girl and spoke very strictly so that she would not touch him and leave him alone. The guy realized that the last 2 years he was literally mired in game addiction, and therefore it became difficult for him to communicate with people. For the guy, there was still a significant factor that this girl was the one who was supposed to send Knox to the next world in the future. The waist hesitated, and dropping her eyes to the floor, she asked for forgiveness from him. The girl decided to explain that she simply did not know that the guy was so seriously tuned to the possession of the sword. Everyone knew that Knox was born a weak child, and the waist only now realized why he only trained his endurance so stubbornly. The girl apologized once again and said that she behaved reprehensible. The girl realized that the guy was not at all as they were talking about him, and not like him seemed to her at the very beginning of their acquaintance. The waist recalled the words of Emma, who said that people tend to make mistakes and make hasty conclusions. Knox did not expect anything like it and now did not know what to answer the girl. He also thought that the waist was always honest, and he noticed it when he played. The guy thought that even despite the fact that the girl had all the skills of a knight, she was still the daughter of a noble family. Therefore, it was not surprising that it was very difficult for her to admit her wrong. Knox decided to tell the girl that if she actually thinks about him, so that she did not tell anyone about his condition. The waist replied that no one would know anything from her and promised to remain silent. Knox understood that now he should not worry about what someone would learn about what happened. After some time, the head of the family sitting in his office told the butler that his guesses were still confirmed. The man decided to find out from the butler his opinion about the Knox, as actually this guy is truly so talented. The butler replied that he could not understand why the guy succumbed at the very beginning. He also believed that the Knox among young people of his age, including all young master, was the best. Knox showed himself from the incredible side, and the senior butler did not even doubt that this guy would give a head start to a lot. The head of the family agreed with the opinion of his butler, and he himself could not understand the reason why the guy decided to succumb. The man had no doubt that more than one talent that he had to see in this guy was hidden in this guy. He ordered the senior butler to follow every step of the guy and told him that he had nothing to do, but always the pass nearby. The head of the family thought about whether the Knox had enough talent to inherit the ruthless blade of darkness. The man also understood that the time remained completely in a sawn-off shotgun, and it was necessary to find out. The head entrusted the Raj in an incredible importance and hoped that the butler would not let him down. Knox at this time saw a system notification that stated that he completed the training task and received an achievement for the first victory in the battle. He realized that this world has become a reality for him, but the game system has not gone anywhere. The guy received awards for this, and these were free statistics classes where 1 point was multiplied by 3. Knox had to work for a month to raise his endurance by 2 points. He looked at the indicator that he needed to raise and decided that it would be a good luck. Knox did this so that the next time he no longer had to work so much without fatigue. He also knew that in the inner lunatic luck is one of the most useful and necessary indicators. The guy decided that now the very time came to check this skill in practice. He also received a neutral bonus and 1 disposable voucher for a certain skill. He was glad that the bonus system is because it was all to him, only to his advantage. Knox decided for himself that at the moment he wants to use a twist. He looked at the invention in front of him and thought that this thing in reality looks very strange. The guy hoped that with the maximum performance of good luck, he would have every chance of getting an average rank, and above which are approximately 95%. It was known that the usual rank and below had white color and the average rank acquired a silver. The golden color had the highest rank. The guy knew that the highest rank had a multicolored color, and he really hoped that he would fall out of gold or higher. Knox eventually managed to get a gold color, and this was a great luck for him. The guy saw that he received a high rank skill, and it was the suggestion of the Supreme Ruler. Information about this skill stated that the indicators of those who have a total statistics lower than it automatically decreases by 20%. The guy laughed because today apparently he received the worst debuff. However, Knox believed that the reward he received was quite good and should be happy. The guy already knew the skill that he had fallen, and it was one of the secrets that is stored in the Reinhardt family. To receive it, the guy will really need this skill, and he decided to do everything possible to get it. He was sure that the head would soon collect all the brothers in the estate, and then he would use it. The young gentleman suddenly thought about the fact that another person would return to the estate of the Reinhardts very soon. It was about Grain von Reinhardt, and this was the second son of the Reinhardt family. This guy was a graduate of the Academy Eldane, who was recently. To become a full-fledged knight, Graun had to go on a trip. Knox understood that he needed to find a secret and deal with Grain, and he has absolutely no time to sit his pants. The guy pleased only one thing, that he would no longer have to worry about the waste. Knox at least hoped for this very much. He was sure that the girl would never violate the promise, and she has no reasons for communicating with him. So the Knox thought that evening, and the guy seemed that he was not mistaken in his reasoning. The girl again stood opposite him, and he could not stand. It decided to find out what she needed from him because he was sure that yesterday they had already figured out everything. The waist lowered her eyes to the floor and quietly asked the guy to tell her something. The girl really wanted to know how Knox still managed to become so strong. The guy simply answered that the girl and so all the month herself personally peered for his training. The waist looked bewildered with such words and did not understand how to be now. Knox decided that their conversation was finished, but the waist tried to stop him and began to ask at least tell how he trained. The guy at that moment thought that he knew is that the waist always wanted to achieve the recognition of his sister. Knox therefore told the girl that before asking such stupid questions and trying to find out how his training went through, she must find something herself. The guy decided to clarify all the same and added that the girl would not hurt to find her talent first. The waist froze and looked even more confused after such words of the guy. Knox understood that reassuring people was not at all his talent, and therefore he did not know what he had to tell the girl. He still decided to advise the girl to stop first to compare herself with other people. In the eyes of the waist, there was still a slight confusion, but the tears also froze and the guy just turned around and left. The Knox stepped back a certain distance and was surprised that the girl did not follow him. He understood that in no case should he allow the waist to learn that he wanted to get a family secret. Knox saw one place and realized that it was the stable of the Reinhardt family, who was famous for the cultivation of the best horses in the country. The senior butler greeted the head of the family and decided to clarify why exactly the man wanted to see him. The man gathered his sons and said that it was probably no secret to anyone why he collected them all here. The head told the guys that today they will have to choose a horse that will serve them for the rest of their lives. Knox guessed something like that and was glad that this moment finally came. The horses in the country that in the family of Reinhardts was considered a holy animal. If suddenly a person became a magician or a knight, then he certainly chose a horse that would become a companion for this person for life while still very young. Knox knew that at the academy, Eldane was taught riding, and knew the same that later there would be a lot of large-scale battles in the game. If it happens so that someone's horse goes to the other world, then this person has to grow a new one from scratch. It was perfectly known to the OM that the magic of movement was a very expensive pleasure. The guy believed that there were very realistic restrictions, and that is why horses play a very important role. Knox believed that he was simply obliged to choose the best horse for himself. The opportunity to choose the first horse for himself was given to the winner of the duel, namely Knox von Reinhardt. It was clarified that such an attempt is given only once. The Gemini did not like everything that was happening at all, and especially what they once again reminded of their loss. The head of the family was very curious which horse would be chosen by a young gentleman. The guy carefully looked at the horses and considered these animals very cute. Nox was looking for not just a horse for himself, but a special one, and after a while he still found it. The guy pointed his hand at one stallion of gray color and said that he was choosing it. The chapter, surprisingly for all those present, said that he gives the guy all the same attempt. Nox heard for another attempt and realized that apparently he made a bad choice in their opinion. However, the guy was not going to refuse his choice and decided to stand on his own until the very end. Nox saw in a system notification that the name was not chosen by this animal and that its main element was darkness. It was also known that the most commonly called up creatures also had their own ranks, and therefore depending on their age the rank could increase by more than one level. It all meant that the horse he chose could reach the highest rank. In addition, this horse was obsidian. It was the rarest species of those found, and the name came from the name of the Fire Mountain. The guy was sure if the chapter was all the Vedanano, then he himself would choose such a horse. Nox was also known about the negative characteristics of this horse. The system window stated that this individual had the remaining lifetime of life for 2 days, 16 hours, and 12 minutes. The guy believed that this skill that belonged to this horse was even worse than his illness. Nox answered the chapter that he had already made a decision, and his choice finally stopped on this horse. The guy had no doubt that with his knowledge he had enough strength and the opportunity to save this animal. The man did not understand for what reason the guy clung to this horse. The head of the family suggested that perhaps the Nox in this animal saw himself. The man suddenly realized that apparently nothing changed, because the guy was as weak and tender and remained sad for him. The man looked at the guy and said that he really hopes that he would not have to regret his choice. The head of the family considered that the conversation could be considered closed and went further on his business. The Gemini still tried to stop their father, but it was already unsuccessfully. Nox completely understood the reaction of a man and did not expect that the choice of a horse could so upset the chapter. The senior butler turned to the young master and said that for the animal it was necessary to choose a name. The horse immediately approached the guy and began to sniff carefully, and the guy thought about how he should give a name. Nox decided that he would call her Carl because he chose exactly the same name when the inner lunatic passed. This name for the guy was very significant. After some time, Carl conveniently settled on the bed of the guy and was carefully covered with a blanket. Nox thought a little and decided for himself that for a start to work, it would be better for him to be clearly without extra eyes and therefore settled with the animal in his room. The guy drew attention to the eyes of the horse and saw in them a great desire to live. He believed that in this animal they were very similar because both of them had a great desire to survive at all costs. It even seemed to the guy that Carl was fighting for his life even longer than himself. Nox suddenly called Ron and added that he knew that the girl was behind his door, and warned that it was better for her to answer him at once. The girl stumbled in fright and fell to the floor but was not going to hide her presence. Rona could not understand how the young master found out that she was behind the door, but the guy was in no hurry to answer her. Nox pointed his hand to the animal and ordered the girl to look after him. Ron was surprised that the horse was in bed. Rona immediately thought that the animal was apparently very comfortable in bed, but she would only have to clean her, and this moment was not very pleased with the girl. Nox told the girl that Carl is sick and he needs appropriate care. The girl looked at the animal with sympathy and promised the young master that she would do whatever she needed. Nox knew that there is still one small problem, is that the girl will certainly be shocked into his further actions. The guy did not know whether such a Ron would withstand, and the girl at that moment was cute chirping with Carl. 3 days later, Rona cried very bitterly due to the fact that Carl went to the next world. Nox understood that the girl was crying so because the horse left the earthly world. The guy saw that in these 3 days the girl became very attached to the animal and invested a lot of effort in caring for Carl. Nox knew that this would happen, therefore there was no surprise for him. The animal was already a foregone conclusion, and he could not be saved. The guy sternly spoke to Roan so that she immediately stopped sobbing, since it became very much to annoy him. The girl did not understand why the young master reacted so. Nox decided to tell the girl all the same that you should not worry so much because Carl will return to them very soon. Rona could not really understand anything, and decided that apparently the young master again began some clouds. Nox ordered him to stand behind him and took out the scroll he needed from his pocket. The guy tried to focus in order to direct all his mana into this scroll. Rona did not cease to be surprised because she had no idea that the young master could use mana, because it was illegal. The guy warned Ron that he was very poorly given control of mana. Therefore, he ordered the girl not to interfere with, otherwise Carl would go to the next time for the second time, and only her fault will already be in this. Rona immediately fell silent and even covered her mouth with her hands, so that she probably did not come from her that could interfere with the young master. Nox in a blink became very serious and decided at that time he did not concentrate. The guy needed a great concentration even because he was not able to awaken the skill sensitivity to mana. In this world, mana was allowed only upon reaching the age of 15 if of course a person is not a member of the imperial family. That is why the descendants of the imperial family owned magic several times more skillfully than those who only entered the academy in order to learn how to use it. The guy had no choice but to try as much as possible to his mana to this scroll. After some time, he felt that his palms began to capture weak flows of energy. Nox guessed right away that it apparently was mana, and therefore diligently continued to do everything the same. The guy used a disposable voucher for a certain skill, and understood that he had no right to make a mistake, and therefore he decided to resort to dark magic. He applied the necessary skill, and a system notification reported that the object Carl could be resurrected. The guy, because of all his might, tried to do everything correctly so that he managed to give a second chance to the animal. Nox continued to use dark magic only in order to achieve the success he needed. In NR, the lunatics had only two types of creatures that had the skill of undead. The first species were creatures who were returned to life with the help of dark magic or dark mana. The second look was creatures that returned to life without an ego and at the same time reborn by stronger creatures. Nox knew that these creatures would be very faithful to their owners no matter what. However, there was only one family that was capable of resurrecting. It was the Marvaz family with a dark past and present. The Reinhafer family was also considered a dark family, but they were a family of knights. Marvazi were the rulers of dark magic who controlled the resurrected. It was also known that the characters who did not belong to the Marvaz family should not be able to use their skills, and this was in principle logical. The guy thought that he was just a one-time voucher for a certain skill, and now at his disposal was Necronomicon. Necronomicon was still known as the book of those who had already gone to the next world. The horse in instant enveloped something like a tentacle, of which there were a lot, and all of them were a rich black color. The guy began to feel very bad and began to fight this condition due to all his might. Rona saw that with the young master it was something to happen, and she began to worry very much for the guy. Nox did not pay attention to anything, and insisted himself only that it remained to suffer quite a bit. The guy drew attention to him at the end of his birth, and it was very bad. A few minutes later, Carl climbed his hind legs, and this was an incredible sight. The horse made a loud sound, and this indicated that the animal received a second chance. This confirmed the system notification since it wrote that the guy successfully managed to activate the skill, and his pet Carl was resurrected. Nox could not hide joy because he still succeeded and his horse was resurrected. Rona froze in place, and all because of the shock, because the girl did not expect to see anything like this. Carl was now a pet who could develop 1.5 times faster, but everything depended on the power of mana of the player. There was an opportunity to develop and call for undead, and Nox considered this to be his victory. Rona could no longer restrain her emotions and rushed to hug both the horse and the young master. Nox did not expect such an impulse from the girl and did not understand at all what she allows itself. Rona could not say a word because tears poured from the girl's eyes simply as a river. The girl calmed down a little and said that she was just very afraid for the fact that the young master would suffer, because it was very dangerous from his part for so long to use Manu. Carl frowned in his manner and tried to get rid of the girl's arms. Rona was indignant at the behavior of the animal because she cared for so much about him and worried. In this case, the girl ordered the horses to spit out all the carrots that she fed him earlier. The Nox grinned from such a crush of these two. Nox decided that he had the secret of the family further on the list, and it is on him that he needs to focus all his attention. A few days later, Nox looked at the map and noticed that the road was practically no different from the one in the game. The guy believed that he was very lucky and thought about the second secret of the Reinhafer family. There was one thing that the Nox was supposed to get at all costs. It is this thing that will help a little compensate for the defabs from the disease. Nox suddenly felt something and immediately grabbed his weapon. The guy thought that perhaps he certainly became too sensitive. In this place, there was a sign that stated that it was a forest of missing children. There was a warning that if suddenly the child steps here, then it may not return or go to the next world, and therefore did not advise to come here at all. Nox understood that it was already not a game at all, but a full reality, and once again the guy did not want to go to the next world. The guy still entered the forest of missing children despite all the obvious warnings. On the territory of the Reinhofer possessions, the forest was located in which was strictly prohibited. Due to the darkness and a thick fog, even the owner of the highest rank or the ranger was very easy to get lost in it. Nox believed that the name of this forest was just a match, because this place could circle anyone around a finger as a small child. However, in this whole story there was one point, and this nuance solved an almost important role. If an adult is already destroying a local monster, then find the necessary artifacts to the mind no longer shines. Everyone knew that the older the monster was, the more dangerous he was. The guy was already setting off in this place several times to the next world before he could fulfill the mission. Therefore, the difficulty of passing the forest of missing children was estimated at least 2.5 stars of 5 of all existing. This game was, in principle, very complicated in itself. Nox admitted to himself that Gaidov in the time of the game, he himself tried to avoid if possible. According to his calculations, at the moment it was the best skill for the disease. The guy in his hands held a large torch with fire with which everything around was illuminated. Nox carefully watched the fire because he had to indicate something, and the main thing was not to miss this moment. The guy knew that the direction of smoke was the key to the successful study of the forest of missing children. Nox knew that he now needed to follow in the opposite direction from him. To begin with, the guy wanted to solve another issue. He turned slightly and asked how long a person was still going to hide. In response to the words of the guy, there was complete silence, and Nox thought that apparently this man decided to play hide and seek with him to the victorious. The guy decided to help a person get out of his shelter, but for this he will need his weapon. Some time ago, the waist still could not believe that the knocks never led to her beauty. The maid suddenly turned to the girl and very strongly asked the mistress to cease to pursue the young Mr. Knox. The woman believed that if the waist continues in the same spirit, then she would most likely get it. The waist assured the woman that she had everything under control, and also promised that she would definitely take care so that she was not fired from the family. The maid believed that the young Madame Talia was so talented that, in her opinion, universal recognition as a future heiress, if only a young Madame Chandel had not been nearby. The woman still could not understand why the girl constantly tries to surpass her sister and behaves terribly to Horrible. The maid was almost sure that the girl had already calmed down and sleeping peacefully. The woman decided to check all the same, but there was no one inside, her great surprise. He was very scared for the young mistress and was very hoping that her guesses would remain erroneous. But since the girl was nowhere, the maid raised everyone on her ears, frightened that she still tied after the young Mr. Knox. The waist still came out of her shelter since there was no more sense to hide and seemed to the guy. Knox expected to see anyone but not the waist, and this was a big surprise for him. The waist greeted the guy and the Knox. Instead of a greeting, immediately Ju asked the girl that she had forgotten here. Suddenly, the Knox sharply pushed the girl and ordered that to immediately become behind him. All this was due to the fact that a large gray wolf was approaching them, from which could only be expected. The waist began to suspect that this forest was the territory of gray wolves. The girl was nervous because she had only a dagger from her weapons. The gray wolf was in no hurry to attack, but he examined the guys very carefully and looked very menacing at the same time. The animal unexpectedly, loudly, and lingeringly howled, and this sound caused only fear of people. After that, the gray wolf did not lose time and immediately rushed to the guys, wanting to destroy both of them. Knox very cleverly and quickly put up a block against the animal, and for that he himself attacked it, and it was very successful. The waist looked shocked as the guy managed to cope with such a beast with such ease. The girl did not know what she was worth expecting from this guy, but each time he did not stop surprising her. Knox decided to ask again and wanted to hear the immediate answer. The guy wanted to know that the waist had forgotten here and why he had come. The girl decided to answer that she had just a night walk and nothing more. Knox threatened her by saying that he was not going to listen to these tales, and ordered one or telling the truth or stay here alone. The waist was frightened because she did not want to stay in this dark, dangerous forest all alone. She spoke in one breath that she was not going to pursue him at all. Just a guy in a short period became so strong, and she wanted to know this secret. The waist also said that she would really like to know about the special training of Knox. Knox, covering his eyes, smiled slightly and thought that at the moment, he was definitely sure of several things. The guy was sure that the waist had too much an overall opinion about him, and the Knox knew that the girl was not hostile, and this was most likely only a plus. Knox also saw that the waist was just a child who could not appreciate the degree of danger of night campaigns for someone. The guy understood that since the girl was one of the main characters, so leaving her here was not an option. Knox, after short thoughts, ordered the waist to follow him. Knox decided to immediately clarify all the time and for all, and therefore told the girl that she did not think that he helps her, and simply tries to get out of this situation so as not to discredit the honor of his family. The waist immediately felt very awkwardly and therefore asked the guy forgiveness for her behavior, and added that he regrets her wrong act. Knox did not respond to the girl's apology, but now he was sure that the waist had to throw anything more dangerous. The waist also decided that she would be right to thank the guy, and therefore she sincerely told Knox thanks for the help provided. The girl changed sharply in her face as she saw that she was very scared ahead. In the darkness, there was a huge flock of wolves, and it was they who caused all these emotions at the waist. Knox put his torch with fire a little forward and did not look frightened at the same time. And on the contrary, the guy was assembled and was ready to repel the attack at any time. The girl clung to the guy with a strong grip, but he ordered the waist to immediately move away from him. Knox decided to explain and said that the girl was preventing him from getting and using her sword for their intended purpose. The guy noticed that those whom he did not expect to see here and therefore should be extremely attentive to him. This location preceded the main path, and apparently at the moment there was a certain prologue. He realized that what very strong monsters at the moment you cannot wait, but here are the elite who can still meet with one rank below the bosses. Judging by the form of the one with which Knox already had to meet and even fight, then it was an elite gray wolf. However, the knowledge of what exactly was his rivals did not really facilitate the task, and that is why he understood that one should always be on a check. The gray wolf, despite the fact that he did not occupy the very top of this pyramid, was no less dangerous and could do a lot of harm, so Knox was on a certain battlefield alone against several animals that tried to find the weak sides of the guy and attack. The guy suddenly thought that sometimes there were such moments when, to make it clear to one that they were all driven into a corner. Knox saw how a large gray will fly on him and suddenly decided for himself to apply the strategy already tested by him. The guy always did the situation in such a situation when he was still Juck and played inner lunatic. Knox was just inimitable and masterfully controlled with wolves that did not give up attempts to get to the guy. The waist admired Knox and was almost sure that the guy attacked not even at full strength, judging by the technique of owning a sword that the guy in a duel against his brothers demonstrated. The girl had the impression that the Nox had already done something like that before, and he had to destroy the gray wolves. Nox saw that the waist again stood too close to him and reminded that she should stay away from him. The waist was a little upset because he realized that the guy apparently considers her completely weak. The girl did not know how to do the right thing in this situation, and therefore simply continued to stand where she indicated her and pointed out. Nox at this moment did not turn to the emotions of the girl since he saw another guests ahead. In all its glory, the guy finally managed to examine the elite gray wolves, and they looked to admit perfectly. At this time, throughout the district, everyone who could look for the young mistress and young master. After some time, they were able to find 2 small tracks of traces and were sure that they precisely belonged to the young master and Mrs. Talia. Now there was no doubt that the young master entered the forest of missing children. The maid suddenly realized that Miss Talia also went to this forest that was known for her danger to the whole district. The girl was so scared because of such news that she did not understand at all what to do all now. One of the men said that he considers all this great stupidity and simply impossible. When asked why, he answered this opinion that all because even the Rainhafer family could not fully study this forest. The forest of the missing children is estimated by a high rank in the family of the Rainhafers, and it was known that if the child steps here, then he may not return or completely go to the other world, and therefore it was impossible to enter it in any case. The existence of this forest could not study it, and not many knew that the entrance to this forest was opened only to children, and only children were able to successfully study the entire forest along and across. The man thought why the Nox needed to go into the forest. The man refused to believe that the guy entrusted the monsters controlling the mind, because judging by the traces of the left trail, the young gentleman moved deliberately carefully. There were also no traces that indicated that someone managed to overcome the strongest barrier from mana that surrounds the entire estate. This could only mean that the young master intentionally entered the forest. The senior butler realized that he had to stop for a long time to deny that the young Mr. Nox had long been the wrong guy, as he had been before. The man decided to inform everyone that the guys have only 2 ways to return. He believed that the young master needs to show resourcefulness in order to find the way back. They all gathered in a small meadow and looked around, hoping that the guys will soon appear in the near future. The maid was very upset because she thought that it was she who subjected the young mistress of great danger. The waist was in combat readiness and kept her only weapon ready. Nox noticed that the girl was very scared, but still was not at a loss. The guy ordered the waist not to do unnecessary gestures so as not to get hurt, and advised just to stand away. The guy talked that a girl should better take care of her strength so that she could run away when the animals attack. After all, only in this way the waist could raise its level of survival. In general, the destruction of the elite wolf was not very dangerous, and was evaluated by 2.5 stars. Nox believed that the waist simply and then it was necessary to remain attentive to everything that happens around. The guy was glad that the girl was clearly well trained, but still not so good that he could entrust her to cover herself from the back. The next moment, Nox saw in a system notification that the time of the Lord of the Time was activated. Nox now had no doubt that with this skill he could quickly deal with these elite wolves. One of these wolves carefully watched the guy but continued to stay in place. Nox was completely confident in his abilities, and even allowed himself to smile at the animal's eyes. The guy effectively repulsed the animal and at the same time remained intact. Several wolves stood a little aside and continued to observe but were in no hurry to attack. Apparently they lost the decision of their leader, who had a terrible appearance. After a moment, apparently the team was mentally given to attack, and several wolves from different sides approached the guy. The battle spun and no one wanted to concede or take defeat. The waist did not take her eyes off the Nox, and when she saw a dangerous moment shouted that the guy was more careful. The wolves also tried to get to the girl who took refuge on the tree. The waist remembered the words of Nox, who ordered immediately to run if she was threatening something. The waist perfectly understood that she could never do this and was not even going to consider this option. Nox turned his attention to the girl and realized that the waist apparently wanted to help him somehow. The waist was more worried than ever, and all her experiences were about Nox. The girl was very hoping that everything was in order with him. The girl could not understand how to help the guy and was nervous from these thoughts even more. Nox has already begun to think about the fact that the girl actually could help him cope with these predators. The guy was distracted because from the side he was already attacked, and the Nox at the last moment, although with difficulty, managed to bounce. The Nox all the same answered the girl and said that everything was in order with him, and thought to himself that there was no time to relax. The waist was very glad to hear that the guy was in order and was not wounded, but did not worry about him less. The Nox was a little upset because apparently the waist was able to see his weak side. The guy suddenly felt a sharp weakness in his hands and realized that this was approaching the recoil from the skill, and was not very happy about this news. While Nox struggled with return to him, a huge wolf that was the leader of this flock began to approach him. The guy was glad that he deigned to get up all the same, and he will finally be able to finish with all this. Nox at least really hoped for this and did not want to consider other options. The animal went around and thus looked closely at the guy, evaluating him. The wolf's eyes lit up with a bright golden glow and a predatory grin appeared on the face. Nox was sure that he was ready, but suddenly he realized that he was much slower than a wolf and it was a big problem for him. The animal no longer waited and suddenly rushed to the attack. The wolf was still able to get closer to the Nox and even hurt him with his powerful paw. The waste was sitting in her shelter, could not restrain emotions, and screamed loudly because she saw what danger threatens Nox. Nox grabbed his injured hand and tried to come to his senses very quickly, because he had no right to lose this battle. The guy began to be angry that only 2.5 stars was entitled to such as a reward. He believed that in this case, a reassessment of this reward was clearly required. Nox was well aware that this elite gray wolf was much smarter and more agile than the one that was in the game. For the guy, he was a small surprise the moment when he realized that the rest was obeying this. Nox did not even doubt that the leader would want to take advantage of orientation in this territory. The guy was not going to despair, and therefore instructed himself that it was necessary to keep the defense as best as possible. Nox also understood well the fact that on one defense he would not last long, and therefore tried not to miss the right moment for his attack. The guy still decided to strike his blow and thought that he was doing everything correctly and successfully. The beast reacted in his own way, and the guy guessed that the wolf was just counting on this, and he waited for the guy to swing and opened. The Nox suddenly froze, and in his gaze it was immediately noticeable something not according to plan. His return overtook at the most inopportune moment. The wolf was close and the number of teeth in his mouth did not portend anything good for Nox. Nox could not predict this, and apparently the guy all the same overestimated himself because he had already passed the game many times and believed that everything was able to do. The guy began to realize his mistake and understood what he did as not a very smart person. A moment later, something happened that Nox could not expect. The guy, for a similar outcome, did not even expect that someone could get the wolf with a small dagger. A few seconds previously thought that if Nox managed to choose the right moment, then she will not be worse. The waste decided to try to take advantage of the opportunity that appeared in order to at least somehow help Nox in this situation. Nox was not at a loss and took advantage of the moment, trying to attack the predator and finally finish the begun. The plan still managed to carry out and the powerful wolf was sent to the next world. The waste was still tense due to the fact that other wolves were still nearby. However, after their leader was sent to the next world, they immediately turned around and fled from this clearing. The waste quickly went down the tree and ran to the guy and immediately clarified whether he was in order. Nox, coming into his senses, looked at the girl and realized that he was intact and alive only thanks to her. The guy wanted to tell her in hearing but stopped at time. He fell silent because he realized that he had just almost thanked the one who would soon send him to the next world. Therefore, Nox answered the girl that there was nothing to worry about or even more to worry about. The waste saw a guy a few minutes earlier wounded and she was not sure that everything was really fine with him. Nox repeated to the girl again that everything is in order with him, and in general there is only a couple of scratches on him for which he should not even think. The waste, only after being convinced of the words of the guy, was able to relax a bit and smile. At the same moment, the girl began to behave strangely and was very scared. Nox thought that perhaps another monster came to them. The waste, from a strong fright, grabbed the guy with both hands. The girl subconsciously felt safe next to him. The girl was so scared because she saw a spider, and it was because of him that such a reaction was. The spider was so small that if you don't look closely, it could not be seen. For a girl, this spider was worse than a disaster, and she was not going to let the guy while the spider would be next to her. Nox did not expect that the girl was so afraid of these insects. He asked the girl that if ordinary spiders scare her so much, then why did she even get into the forest after him? The waste was surprised that the Nox was not afraid of these creatures at all. And the guy himself grinned and said that the girl clearly does not shine to become a knight. The waste, from shock and from anger at these words, removed her hands and shouted loudly, "There is no one. She does not agree with his theory at all." Nox began to breathe heavily and realized that the recoil made itself felt again, but the frightened expression of the waste said that nothing was worried about. The guy understood that he had to admit that this fragile girl still contributed, and no matter how sarcastically it sounded, but Nox understood that it was still alive only thanks to her. Nox was grateful for this girl because he saw that his condition was not at all indifferent to her. After they won the animals, they had to get out of this forest that kept many secrets in themselves. At this time, the maid had already begun to mourn the young lady, considering the guilty only herself in this tragedy. The senior butler thought that the disappearance of Mrs. Talia would undermine the relationship between families. It was known that many children had already disappeared on the territory of this forest, and many quietly said that it was all because of the non-professionalism of the Rainhafer family. Rodville was distracted from his thoughts because one of their people saw something suspicious ahead. The fog began to dissipate around, and this was already visible more distinct. They all froze from shock as it meant that the forest of missing children was investigated. The maid could not believe her eyes and decided to clarify with the butler whether they really see that mana was scattering. Rodville replied that the woman understood everything correctly, and this means that the forest was completely studied. The butler realized that what they could only dream of turning into reality. The woman thought and suddenly exclaimed from strong emotions, because it all leads to the fact that the young Mr. Nox was able to cope. So it turned out to be a few long minutes of expectations. They all saw two silhouettes ahead that approached closer and closer. This was returned by the young Mr. Knox and young Madame Talia. People were shocked that the guy managed to explore the forest and were amazed that Mr. Knox walked as if nothing had happened. The senior butler could not restrain a smile from the events experienced, and he had no doubt anymore. Rodval was sure that the hierarchy of the Reynan family had to survive significant changes. Knox saw how many people gathered and did not understand why they were all here. The woman immediately surrounded the waist with her attention and hugs as she was very worried about her. Rodal told Knox that the family of a young master was shocked no less than his disappearance. Knox did not understand how his family could worry about such a useless person. He believed that the reputation of the family as a strongest dark family would collapse. The girl asked the maid of Emma to stop crying, and the woman decided that she would remind the young lady as soon as possible each of the 71 rules of the Stillanera family. The waist looked at the man who was so sincerely worried about her and asked the woman forgiveness for her act. Emma replied that she had no right to blame for something a young lady, because she is an ordinary maid. The woman was sure that the chapter himself intelligibly teach the waist to follow the rules, and will most likely personally. Knox, looking at Emma, thought that most likely this maid too had more stamina. The guy decided to check and saw that Emma's endurance level was 4.5. Emma personally decided to thank the young Mr. Knox for the protection of the young mistress, and was the guy for this grateful. Knox looked at the waist and said that of course he did not want to cross her once again. However, the guy admitted and said that without a girl he would not have succeeded, and asked her not to blame herself. With these words, the Knox was very surprised by the waist. The guy finally was left alone and decided that it was finally time to relax. Knox just did not expect to meet Riddell at the entrance to the forest with the knights. The guy thought that such attention was possible because of the waist. The guy decided that this was not so important because he now had the secret of the family. The Knox was able after this battle to get an artifact of the accessory, or rather, he received a ring of dark flame. This ring belonged to the rank below the average and had a condition of use. Only those who were able to master the dark mana could use the artifact. The ring had a special effect, and, or rather, if it was clarified, it won the target in parallel using the ring. Then it was possible to take a little vitality of the vanquished for himself. The higher the rank of defeated, the more vitality could be obtained. Knox knew that this was the only artifact that was able to steal the vitality of others, and it was a ring of dark flame. However, even the possession of this ring was not able to extend life. It was well known that life could not be renewed endlessly. It was said that it was possible to take only a little vitality, but this will still not be enough to get rid of an incurable disease. However, one could try and develop further, and that is why the guy put on a finger of dark flame on his finger. The guy believed that it was still better than living in hopeless eternal fear to go to the next world. Knox, after putting on the ring, immediately felt how life and mana began to be added to him. The guy suddenly asked Ron to go to him and said that he was well aware that the girl was behind his door. Rona still looked and asked, really, her young master was able to see through objects. The guy asked the girl to give him his hand and ordered it to do it as quickly as possible and without unnecessary questions. She realized that Mr. Knox wanted her and decided to clarify if she still won again, he would actually raise her salary. The guy confirmed but decided to clarify if Rona loses, then 20% of the salary will be deducted. A few seconds literally after they began to compete in strength on the hands of the Knox, easily the girl to win. Rona looked at the table and did not quite understand what was happening now, but in her opinion, something inexplicable in her opinion. The girl immediately began to put pressure on the guy, saying that it was not at all to match her son from a noble family to cut the salary of a poor servant at 20%. Knox did not argue or inspect his own, but said that his family and so much know about his weaknesses and subtly hinted from whose hands it was. That is why the guy decided that he did not need to worry about such trivial things as honor. Rona realized his mistake and began to ask for forgiveness from the young master. The Knox suddenly froze because it suddenly received a system notification in which it was written that the action of the skill of a weak immunity was activated, and therefore it received an inflammation of the wrist of the 2nd degree. The guy, in addition to everything, also received the flu of the 1st stage, and all this was due to negative skills that did not please him at all. Knox told the girl that he canceled the decrease in her salary and ordered him to immediately bring him ice and a wet towel. Rona noticed that the guy turned sharply and began to worry. The guy replied that everything was in order and added that he was too glad that he was finally able to get a ring and he just needed to relax a bit. Knox suddenly heard something, and he was practically sure that he heard the name of the Yuchan. 6 months have passed since the Knox got 2 secrets, namely Carl and the Ring of the Dark Flame. The guy understood that he had no chance in order to use them either. The reason for this was that Knox von Reinhafer was punished. He could not say that because of that trick he had some problems because he was even able to explore the forest of lost children. However, Knox could not understand how, after that, they could dare to punish him. The guy demanded an immediate answer and wanted to hear him from his maid Ron. The girl answered the young master that she had a maid who serves the family and added that she was very afraid that she would be cut off if she dares to speak poorly about the chapter. The guy threatened her and said that since he promises that her salary was cut out if she does not adapt to his preferences. Rona immediately began to say that the head of the family was completely wrong, and she did not understand how he could not understand the young master. Nox thought that in any case he believes that he tried very well to get along here. The guy led a very productive life watching how Carl grows, and decided for himself that he was no longer going to sit still, because his life is becoming shorter every day. Due to the effect of the disease, the guy remains 147 days. For some reason, Nox began to think that his system window, in a sense, was interested in his life even more than himself. He thanked with sarcasm for such a tactful and sweet reminder. The guy definitely decided that he was enough and was going to beg from his father permission to go out at least somewhere. Suddenly, the guest granted the young master, and it was a senior butler who reported that the chapter wanted to see him. Nox did not expect that the chapter would be ahead, and he himself would be expected. And the guy was very loved for what exactly? The young man stood among the large number of monsters of which he masterfully destroyed with the help of his weapons. In the past, it was a very dangerous night because then many demons monsters decided to attack from all sides. The man remembered that this is a large number of demons and people who were enclosed in them. Every second that night was very dangerous and sent many people to the next world. The chapter remembered that it was just a real nightmare in reality, and it was without any exaggeration. The man understood that one day one of his sons who would be strong enough to manage with a ruthless clique of darkness. The head of the family was well aware that he could not just hope for him. He needs an undeniable talent because the chosen will have to send him to the next world. The senior butler entered the office and informed the chapter that the young gentleman would arrive very soon. The head ordered that the Nox hurried because he himself does not know how to explore the forest of missing children. Nox, on the other hand, was somehow able to do this, and therefore the man believed that the guy should be rewarded for this. The man delayed this award not just like that, but because of the fundamental objections of the family advisors. It's just that no one believed that the incapable number would suddenly change so, and will be able to organize an investigation to check for definitely his hand. The chapter understood that even he could not help but listen to the opinion of the family advisors, and therefore it was necessary to conduct the investigation. Nox arrived at the head of the family how he ordered that and bowed his head slightly, thereby greeting him. The man ordered the young master to rise and carefully looked at his son. The head believed that the guy's actions were simply not permissible and hoped that the young Mr. Nox himself perfectly understood this. The man believed that despite this, his duty as a patriarch is rewarding for achievements, even if he had to reward such as a guy. He added that it was the poet and called to discuss the award. Nox could not believe in what he heard because he certainly did not count on any rewards. The man said that he would fulfill only one request of the guy, whatever she is. Nox was surprised that the chapter promises to fulfill what he did not want to. The guy suddenly thought for playing inner lunatic just for days on end, but so that the head rewarded someone like this, of course, for the first time. The man was usually all so magnificent and strict. The guy had the feeling that someone had something to do with his head, but he was very hoping that it was no trap. Nox decided all the same again to ask the head is ready to fulfill any desire. The man replied that everything is so and he is ready to provide him with everything that only he wants, because he gives the word of the head of the Reinhofer family. The chapter promised to fulfill any request and even swore a centuries, old family history, and a ruthless blade of darkness. The guy still could not believe that the man says all this is seriously, but apparently it is. The only warning from the chapter was that if the request was a guy, some ridiculous, then his opinion will change about him. The man hoped that the young master would not allow such stupidity. Nox was not going to ask for something ridiculous, and therefore asked the chapter to give him a little time to think about everything well. The chapter was not against it and told the guy that he was allowed from this moment to go beyond their estates. However, the man asked Nox to try not to find problems on his head like last time. The chapter wanted a young master to always remember that he is a representative of the Reinhofer family. The next day, on the porch of the estate, the family of the Reinhofers escorted the young Madame Talia. The waste looked at Nox and said that now they will see Eldane Academy. The girl hoped and was already waiting for the moment when they could meet again. Rodville turned to the young master and quietly advised anything to answer the question of the young mistress. Nox, already stroking the girl, replied that they would meet only if the waste had become a real knight by that time. The waste was very delighted with such words and wanted to immediately find out exactly which knight. Nox replied that, for example, such a knight who is not afraid of everything in a row, and an example cited huge spiders. The girl only now realized that the guy was mocking her on her, and she did not like it at all. That is why she specifically hit the guy and did it so that he coughed. Nox thought that it was probably better for him to start talking for the wolves. Nox thought that, in principle, all this is not so important, but it should have admitted that the waste was strong enough. The girl in turn promised that she would return when she would become a real knight, and then the guy is not to do. Nox hoped only that the waste did not begin to develop the plan how exactly and when to send it to the next world. Emma decided with all her heart to thank the young master. Nox did not understand why the maid of the Stillanera family needs to thank him. Emma replied that all these thanks because Mr. Nox was able to save the young Madame Talia. The guy suddenly decided to say that he was not so much and wanted to save her. But whatever it was there, he wanted to finally leave him alone and left. As a matter of fact, everything happened, and a few minutes later a carriage with a young mistress left the gates of the Rainhafer family estate. Nox finally could exhale, but for some reason it seemed to him more and more that he began to get used to this hectic life. He was not completely sure, but apparently he even began to like it. Nox received a system notification that stated that because of the effect of a serious illness, he left 146 days. The guy perfectly understood that he simply had no time left to just sit all this. A few days later, Rona suddenly told the young master that, due to this situation, he should find a new maid and servants for himself. Nox thought about the words of Rona, but his thoughts were prevented by a senior butler who suddenly arrived in his room. The man decided to report that the Academy Eldane had already sent him a maid in order to help the guy get together. Rodval said that from today, this girl will serve him, and ordered that he would introduce herself. The girl greeted how the young master was supposed to and said that now she is his personal maid, and called her Jitri de Lovilia. Nox also introduced himself as it demanded that etiquette and looked very carefully at the girl in front of him. With the help of his capable, he was able to consider that she is the owner of the main element Earth, and with the lack of any achievements. However, the girl had negative features such as duplicity and superficiality, and most importantly, Jitri was a spy. Nox also learned that the girl had an additional skill of an ideal housewife, and has now evaluated the player by order of Theo von Reinhofer. Nox thought about the fact that how is everything in life paradoxically, because for some reason when time becomes extremely limited, it runs too quickly. The guy could only note from the pluses that he developed quickly enough despite the abundance of all kinds of debuffs. He often thought that very soon he would be accepted to the Academy Eldane, where he carefully tried to enter. Rona also often talked about this, and she could not believe that in just 2 months, a young gentleman would already be at the Eldane Academy. Nox told the girl that she really was so glad that he would finally leave here. Rona, after a moment, began to sob bitterly, and sobbing, said that she would be very bored for her young master. Nox ordered the girl not to replay because he still was not going to raise her salary. I thought to himself that he did not even have time for all these conversations with Rona. The guy understood well that if in the next 2 months he would not be able to raise his statistics at least a little, he would simply be destroyed at the academy. The Academy of Eldane was considered the best in the Empire, and it was in it that the strongest students gathered from all over the country. Nox believed that he first needs to overcome it, and after starting the main branch of history where he would have to play the role of the villain Nox von Reinhofer. The guy was very angry and simply knocked out of the rut that everything around him would not touch. It was so difficult. Jitri made herself felt about herself and said that she was ready to support and help the young master with all her might. Nox used to think that no one would let him get together and leave. Theo von Reinhofer was one of the most important villains and strongest creatures around the world. Interested in how the man was able to achieve his current position, many believed that all thanks to his skillful possession of the sword. However, the man was so comprehensive developed that doubts about the unambiguity of their judgments crept in. In fact, the main reason that allowed Theo to take a place at the top of the Reinhofer family was his eternal suspicions of everything and everyone that surrounded him. The man looked at the maid and said that he was very supposed to be at her and hopes that the girl would not let him down. Jitri bowed her head low and replied that she would do everything possible that she could. Theo informed the girl that rumors reached him that the lovely family dropped her into the very bottom of the list of heirs. The man promised her that if she copes well with the assignment, he would make every effort to support her as the heiress. Jitri said that she would serve the young master faith and truth. The girl was determined to resolutely monitor every movement of the guy and report on everything. Before leaving, the man ordered not to forget the girl who exactly her master. Jitri only after closing the door was able to take a breath at least a little. The girl picked up her medallion that led around her neck and looked into him with love. He was wearing a photograph of relatives and she realized that she had no right to any doubts. The Nox was already in his bed, still could not throw out thoughts of a spy from his head. The guy understood that Theo wanted to make sure that he was a real Nox. After all, those who were obsessed with the demon were a very familiar and common thing in inner lunatics. Nox was just one of these characters where, in the original version of the plotline, his body was taken by the #1 Baal demon. The guy was calm and knew that he had nothing to fear on the extreme until Theo knew who he really was. All the guy's thoughts again returned to a girl named Jitri, who could be a very big problem for him. He knew that while the girl was not involved in the main story, it would be very stupid on his part to get rid of her. If you look in the original, then this girl was to become the next head of the lovely family. However, the girl and father of the girl sent her uncle in the next world, and thus, Jitri lost her rights to establish the next head of the family. Her further actions were in principle obvious because, in order to escape from her family, she came to the Ruinhafer house and became their maid. The girl seemed to be friendly and the one that is always smiling, but inside she was all exhausted and unpleasant. It was so the character located on the Gran of Despair. The guy remembered her last decision before the start of the first part of the main story. Jitri simply could no longer emotionally withstand all this and decided to independently go to the next world. Nox still could not understand what to do next now. The guy fought himself. The guy was thinking about moving away from the intended story and, as a result, to save the one who should no longer exist. This is all over on condition that in such a way he will put himself under attack. The next day, Nox gathered his two maids and told them something. The guy decided that from today they would hunt with him to the local monsters. He ordered them both to accompany him and help if necessary. Rona, as soon as she heard about this, could not restrain her emotions and began to resent loudly. The girl was afraid of only one word about monsters, and there was nothing to say for hunting. Rona decided to cheat and began to tell the master that she had to leave them because she did not feel important. Jitty immediately answered that she accepted all the information and was ready to execute in any minutes. Rona tried to reason her colleague and led with Jitri, as with little saying that she should not agree to everything. Nox understood that for the maid was absolutely normal to be afraid of hunting for monsters. He considered the statement in principle it was quite stupid in itself. The guy turned to Rona and talked about the fact that he has long known that the girl used all her hospital days, and therefore she cannot leave now. Nox said how he cut off and said that you should not expect something more about him. Nox threatened the girl that if she does not fulfill his orders, he would definitely shut her salary and first start with half. Rona tried to reassure herself and therefore decided to clarify with the young master what to bring to a bow or possibly a sword. Jitri asked for permission from Nox before she starts to report to Sir Rogel that the young master intends to leave the estate. For Nox, now it's how to turn, but it was an opportunity to extend your life. The guy was going to do everything possible from him, if only he could extend his life. He decided that since he was limited in his movements, he would proceed from what is. Nox and Maid saddled the horses and all rushed into the distance. The man saw them in the window and very closely watched the guy constantly scrolling different thoughts in his head. A few days later, the forest of missing children now in appearance, nothing different from the usual forest. Nox fought with the wolf and won, for which he was able to get the very little life energy of a gray wolf. His reward was 2 hours of life that was equated with the most expensive what was it all. He looked around to understand all the wolves. He destroyed here for only one such hunt to earn 2 hours of life was considered a good result. Jitri told the young master that he may already need a vacation because he has been hunting continuously for an hour. The guy understood that without the use of the Lord of Time, the hunt lasts too long. If you take everything into account, Nox managed to knock out only 1 hour of life. Of course, he was so suspected that the calculations would be far from ideal, but he did not think that so. Nox could not afford to go out every hour and hunt monsters. However, the main problem of the guy was that the monsters were definitely her endless. The Nox assumed that over the past couple of days he sent to the other world for most of the living here. He understood that with such a development of events, his plan for prolonging life was divided into fluff. Nox could never even think that the lack of monsters in the district will eventually become such a problem. Jitri considered it simply amazing that the guy upset a small number of monsters in the territory. She thought that if someone had heard it from the outside, then he would certainly have thought that a person was not in himself. Nox decided that he had nothing more to do here and it was time to return to the estate. Jitri suggested preparing a warm bath for a young master and promised to choose the most favorable water temperature for him. The guy saw how the girl was trying in every possible way to please him and uses, let's say, his talents to the maximum. In a rumor, he answered that he wants to take a bath to dinner and ordered her to hurry. Jitri was ready to begin to fulfill his duties immediately and said that a young master could completely rely on her. Rona felt herself unnecessary in their company and therefore told Mr. Nox that she would certainly engage in cleaning their room. The guy answered her that he doesn't care and she can do whatever she wants and hooked such an answer slightly. The young gentleman is still stopping Jitri in order to find out something for himself. Nox looked at the girl very carefully and asked to whom she still serves. The girl did not expect anything like it and therefore looked very surprised and confused. Jitri realized that her skill master of beauty support and the power of the sword have no meaning if she could not use it. Therefore, from all this, she will throw out simply without hesitation. Nox suddenly said that such an answer is not very happy with him, and he will apply certain measures. The girl generally stopped understanding anything, because she still did not have time to say the words. Jitri only tried to say something intelligible, but then she interrupted her, saying that he already knew what she wanted to say. The young gentleman added that the girl should not worry because he was gone by any desire to continue this interrogation. The guy only said that he was even to some extent grateful to the girl because a 3-story deception went around his ears and did not have to listen to it all. Jitty at that moment looked completely confused. Nox glanced at the maid and said that he did not care to whom she was serving and added that he would consider the girl for her. The guy gave his permission that the girl, and if necessary, could twist how she wants, and said that their conversation was finished on this. He thought that in comparison with unconditional trust, it is likely that their mutual use of each other could turn into torture for them. However, Nox understood that he and Jitri have such a relationship and nothing can be done about it. Rona was already resting at home, reflected on those and whether the young Mr. Knox is bending. She remembered that the guy not so long ago betrayed her something like that. If she wouldn't run with him, then he would not laugh at. Something like such a young Mr. Knox told her at every training session. At that moment, Jitri read the book, but still supported the dialogue with Rona on the topic of their young master and his slightly strange behavior. The girl was already heard about how the young master suddenly changed sharply. The guy was still discussing all this in the family of Lovioya. Jitri then did not attach importance to all those gossip after all. She believed that people rarely changed beyond recognition. However, everyone around only talked about how the Knox was able to defeat two brothers at once, and as a result, received the right to study at the academy. The girl also knew that the guy was one of those who strengthened the greatness of his family, and it was the exact opposite of Jitri herself. Jitri was well aware that she had stolen so low, but at the same time being a legal heiress. The girl suddenly remembered the words that young Mr. Knox told her today. The guy then gave permission, and if they wanted to twist how it pleases her, and he finished. She scrolled this phrase in her head many times, and did not understand what he had in mind. A little later, an incredible rumor passed among the inhabitants of the Reinheffer estate that Jitri expelled from her own family. The girl now no longer had the right to serve the Reinheffers family, and this did not pass without a trace for her. Jitri received a letter that said that she does not deserve the right to be the next heiress. The letter also wrote that Gyrus betrayed her family and will certainly bear responsibility for his sins. The girl was deprived of all rights as a representative of the first line of the family. Jitri suggested that in the family of Reinheffers, apparently, she would not linger for a long time. This was in principle, and it is not surprising because they were one of the most important dark families. The girl understood that she was working in this place with a servant of their strange son, simply because she lost her family. She knew that she had not the slightest right to serve him. Jitty expected that soon she would be kicked out of here, and in the end she would already serve someone else. The girl hid her emotions deep in the shower, and opening the door she needed affectionately smiled and greeted everyone. The room was all the maids of this estate, and she believed that these girls already knew about everything. Jitri understood that she had long been accustomed to condemning views. Suddenly, Rona, who was in a hurry to meet the girl, called her urgently and added that she had already been searched everywhere. Jitri could not believe that Rona really was not in the know. Rona suddenly took the girl tightly by the hand, which caused Jitri embarrassment and misunderstanding. Jitri could not understand the girl so pretended to, or actually thinks that they were friends. Jitri believed that no matter what the reason was the reason, but at the moment the girl is doing some kind of stupidity. She believed that they and the young Mr. Knox do nonsense, but that she did not understand all this. Knox mysteriously looked out the window and thought that the end is still inevitable. The end was in his opinion inevitable not only for Jitri, because Theo perhaps also received a letter. The guy knew that the accusations of the crimes of Father Jitri were actually substituted. However, Knox also knew that he was quite able to help the girl. He believed that simply because it is impossible to predict what consequences this effect of a butterfly would entail. The battle with the wolves took place enchanted, and the pen had to admit it was very good. After the guy sent the beast to the next world, he heard some words from the side. They could not help but notice that their young master was even more merciless today than usual. The maids hid in the bushes and discussed Knox. Rona believed that usually the young master was more merciful. Jitri was confused after what she had to see and did not know how to react to this correctly. The guy was in no hurry to leave the clearing where he destroyed the wolf a moment ago, as he hoped for continuation. Knox expected the one who was supposed to show up, but apparently this creature was not going to crawl out today. He knew that in the forest of missing children there was a monster that came only when the total number of monsters remains somewhere about 20%. He was called the hidden boss of monsters. The guy would like to believe that the destruction of this monster will be able to raise his personal characteristics well. But judging by all this, it was not destined to come true. Suddenly, the guy felt something, but only he could not make out what it was. All that he managed to notice is that it was just an irresistible speed that just approached the boss. After a few seconds, the guy was still able to examine the Oz of large sizes, and it was an elite royal wasp. Knox realized that it would be very difficult with this monster, but not so that he could not send this royal individual to the next world. Jitri, as soon as she saw that the young man threatens the danger without hesitation, rushed forward and closed him with herself. Knox was sure that from such an attack, he could be dodged without the help of Jitri, however. He was not given such an opportunity. The guy could not understand only why the girl had to save him. He could not imagine who would still dare to rush at the monster that suddenly declared in front of his nose. The guy decided that he would take advantage of the skill and Jitri would save at the same time. Knox in the next instant used the skill of the Lord of Time and activated it. The little girl Jitri sat on the floor and cried due to the fact that she fell into another Uriah. Parents complained due to the fact that the abrasions on their knees did not heal to the end. The girl recalled how her parents always told her these words. Mom and Dad were very worried, and every time they worried when Jitri fell and broke her knees. The girl believed that, however, the same effect took place with abrasions on her heart that never dragged on. She is not sure that her parents discouraged her such a future. Jitri remembered the question of the young master when he wanted to know who she serves. The girl also remembered her relative who sent her parents to the next world, and informed Jitri that since then it was only his family. She remembered the different fragments from her life, the more she asked herself the question for herself and to whom she should serve. Nox, because of his might, tried to help Jitri and looked very scared at the same time. The guy asked the girl to stay with all his might. He himself received a system notification that he defeated the monster and received exclusive awards for this. Rona told the young master that they needed to return to the estate as soon as possible. Nox perfectly understood this and was going to take home. Jitri was weak but still thought that people who are going to use you do not do so and do not worry. The girl did not understand why she hears the fear of the guy and anger in his voice. The head of the family was passionate about the letter that received and considered this situation extremely difficult. The senior butler told the head that, according to the study, the letter was truthfully. The family of Lavilia actually decided to exclude Jitri. The head accepted Jitri in the first place because it could have reached the opportunity to capture Lavilia's family. The man knew that because of the loss of the chapter, their situation was now very shaky, which thereby determined better conditions for suppressing this family. More precisely, one could say that the instability of this family played a big role. All this negatively affected the position of the heir, and thus, by their intervention, the Reinhafer could subordinate them. The man read a letter in which it was said that Jitri lost all rights as a representative of the first line of the family. He realized that this happened even before the opportunity turned up to implement the plan. The head of the family believed that nothing can be done about this, and now he needed to understand what to do with the girl next. The butler believed that it would be incredibly regrettable to leave the nameless servant next to the young Mr. Nox. After all, at the academy, Eldane would probably not understand and would not approve of this. He told the chapter that they need to solve this issue quietly and without unnecessary attention. A moment later, a man burst into their office without permission, who apologized for his impudence, but he had an urgent business. The man informed the chapter that the young Mr. Nox brought the maid who was injured in the hunt while the guy hunted himself. The guy said that this girl was poisoned and is currently in critical condition. He also reported that the guy without demand gave her an expensive antidote and therefore decided to immediately report everything. The senior butler said that he was very hoping that it was not a healing potion of Mangadora, but his fears were just justified. This medicine was very expensive and the butler covered his eyes with shock. The chapter thought that he did not expect that the Nox would be tied to the maid so quickly and was now afraid that such feelings came around. Rona, not giving up stubbornly, called Jitri, who saw everything around in the blurry picture. Jitri finally was able to completely open her eyes, and Ron was very delighted that the girl finally came to her senses. The girl was still in poor condition and remembered little what happened to her, but for the young Mr. Nox, she asked, first of all, whether he was in order. Jitri remembered her act, but she just did not understand why she decided to take a risk and protect the master. Rona replied that the young gentleman gave her a healing antidote, and only therefore she was able to escape. She told how the guy brought Jitri to the doctor and ordered to save the girl at all costs. The guy threatened the doctor by saying that if he wants to live, then he should use the potion. Jitri realized that we were talking about the healing potion of Mandragora, but why did the young master decide to do so, she did not understand. The girl thought that the guy kept her only for his own benefit, and this act with the potion contradicted everything. Jitri wanted to know where Mr. Nox is now located, but Rona scared that the girl needed peace and restoration. Rona decided to report that the young gentleman left to look for a chamberlain, and the guy also asked to notify him as soon as the girl wakes up. The maid told Jitri that she would soon return to her, but for now she ordered that to rest. As soon as the door of the Jitri closed behind Rona, immediately got out of bed and began to collect her things. The girl was sure that she had no place here, and she knows very well that she does not deserve to be not here anywhere else. Jitri left a letter to the young master in which it was said that she leaves her pendant and thinks that he could cover all the expenses for the antidote that they gave her. The girl also wrote that she is very grateful to Mr. Nox for saving her life. Jitri, as soon as she left the room, immediately faced her face to face with a young master who wanted to know where the girl gathered. The girl did not expect this meeting, so that she could not answer anything and was just silent. Nox decided to ask again where she was going. He recalled how he threatened the doctor, who was concerned about the cost of the medicine that Jitri needed. The doctor decided to explain to Mr. Nox that without the permission of the chapter, he simply cannot give the girl a medicine. The guy was surprised that apparently Rodvel for many stood above him in the family hierarchy. Nox was angry and said that he himself would immediately report on all his father, and ordered the doctor to do his job. The doctor gave her the necessary potion with which it was possible to neutralize the poison, and only thanks to this the girl would live. Nox heard and saw everything he wanted and was already leaving, ordered to immediately report to him when Jitri came to his senses. The head was surprised by their personal meeting because the young Mr. Nox very rarely searched for him, but he realized that this was connected with that servant. The young Mr. Nox bowed his head low and greeted the chapter properly. In addition, the guy activated the skill of acting. Nox looked at the chapter and said that he has one request that the head promised to fulfill. The guy asks the head to give him Gitri de Lovelia because the girl still does not belong to her family anymore. Nox was sure that the effect of the butterfly would definitely affect the course of history. The guy thus wanted to solve the question with the spy of Theo at the same time. Today, when he saw how the girl rushed to save him, something could understand for himself. For the young Mr. Nox, it was an answer that Gitri never voiced in a hearing. However, the act of the girl himself put everything in its place without unnecessary words. The head listened to the guy and decided that once he wanted to use his one desire so ready to fulfill, Nox gained a determination and told the chapter that he would like to say something else. The guy was able to intrigue the chapter, and the man gave permission to continue the guy. Nox said that if the head of the family is his father, then he urges him to stop playing his people. At the same moment, the guy received a system notification that the action of the skill can soon be interrupted due to his emotional state. The young Mr. Nox returned from his memoirs and heard the answer that Gitri leaves because he believes that she had no place here. The girl wanted to thank the guy for everything he did for her, but the young master interrupted her and once again asked his question where she was going. Nox wanted to know why his maid runs away instead of doing his work. The girl did not understand why the young master demands an answer from her, because he already knows everything so well. Gitri dared to look into the guy's eyes and talked about the fact that the chapter ordered her to follow the young master, and therefore to deceive him. The girl could no longer restrain her emotions and with tears in her eyes asked the guy why he just won't let her go, because she was deceiving him all this time. Gitri believed that she deserved all this, and she had no questions to the young master. The guy was only now able to make out the girl behind the mask, and he immediately saw that she was also a man. Gitri was a man who decided not to give up and fight no matter what. Aloud, the young master said all people constantly deceive each other. Gitri believed that she had committed a real crime in relation to the young master. Nox replied that this was exactly what he did not like, that the girl betrayed him, and decided after that just to leave, and without paying for her act. The guy added more that she did not allow her to leave the walls of this house. The guy told the girl that she remains here, and may he have no idea what was there in his father's head in this regard, but he does not need her belonging to the family of Lovio. A young master looking at Gitri said that he needs her abilities. The guy wanted Gitri to help him until he pays for his own crime. The young Mr. Nox believed that until then, Gitri is his maid and she should not forget about it. The girl did not expect anything like this, but she answered that she heard and understood her master. Gitri promised the guy what would help him and would be on his side to the very end, and this will not change. The girl suddenly reminded his question when the young master would like to know who the girl serves. Gitri stopped crying and already with a smile on her face said that she hopes the young master now knows the answer to this question. The guy also smiled slightly and answered that now he understands everything, and this question no longer bothers him. Rona, fulfilling her work, told other maids as a young Mr. Nox directly threatened the doctor. Nox interrupted the girl and ordered not to act on his nerves, at least in his presence. The guy grinned at the fact that Rona did not make excuses and somehow comment on his words. Gitri also began her duties, but Ron was excited and did not want the girl to overstrain. Rona, already leaving, informed the young master that she had to do their underwear drying. The maid went away accidentally touched the young master, and the guy thought that Rona always had only problems from Rona, but he said it was not angrily. Nox decided to recall Gitri about the fact that it was she who would go to the Aldine Academy with him 2 months later. The girl replied that she knew everything about it and already began to prepare a little for the move. Gitri has already collected for the young master the first necessity. These were books of medicine clothing and a special form for trips. Nox, listening to the girl, noticed that she no longer squeezed out a smile at the sight of him. The girl apparently was just tired of pretending to pretend, and not her were all her. The guy was now much more pleasant to communicate with her, and he was glad that they no longer have to spread with politeness and meaningless conversations. However, the young gentleman was now sure of what, and for him it was the most important thing. The guy knew that now if they suddenly find themselves in a corner, then there would be a back-to-the-back. Nox just knew that now they would never betray each other, and this confidence cost a lot. He believed that it would be much better for both of them. The guy suddenly decided to clarify whether he was in order, and thereby the Nox was very surprised. Gitri asked such a question because unpleasant rumors went about him. The guy was very surprised, and he even wondered what could be worse than existing. The girl uncertainly began that many began to think that the young master left her with his maid because she fell in love. The guy thought was really in all, although he understood that if he would think, the Nox would most likely be embarrassed by this news. The young gentleman was sure that he did not give the ground for gossip. Gitri decided to explain that she wasn't about this to the guy. The girl just thought that the young Mr. Nox could become awkward because of this. The guy replied that the girl had nothing to worry about, and besides, he knew that Gitri personally heard everything that he was still saying about him, that he was not capable and just a shame on the family. The girl is not loud, but all the same she said that everything was not so running. Nox immediately stopped her and warned that if she lies, then he would destroy her. Gitri decided to immediately admit and said that of course she heard everything, but she considered something even more terrible. The girl decided to admit and added that many began to rumor about the fact that the young master became a man who had no morality. Nox realized that unfortunately, after everything he had done, his reputation was still below the skirting board. Although he admitted to himself that he had previously been an incapable of weakness. Now the guy was just an upstart, but it was very capable, but this was not enough. The guy knew that Nox was a villain, and his main task was to remain a villain so that the main character would appear in all his glory. He perfectly understood that the protagonist and inner lunatic was already there, and it was not him. The guy decided that there were already enough conversations and gossip, and the girl is worth it in general. The young gentleman told Jitri that he has one assignment for her that must be fulfilled. The guy understood to survive at the Eldane Academy. It was obvious that it was necessary to properly prepare in advance, not only to her, but also to himself. The girl did not quite understand what the young gentleman had in mind by the word to prepare. Nox could not help but notice that Jitri's skill is an unchanged heart, that she could completely trust a certain person. That is why he was going to share with her plans for the future. The guy believed that for him, it would only be better if the girl learns a little more about him. Nox told the girl that he wants to start studying magic before starting training at the academy, and Jitri should help him in this. Jitri was surprised since everyone knew that it was prohibited by the law of the Empire, and the young master really did not know this. The guy smiled and replied that, of course, he was in the know, but he believed that since he was already mediocrity, even without any morality, what was already losing. Jitri only now realized that the young Mr. Nox was offended by all these rumors and words about him. The girl was sure that the young master has good reasons to take such risks. She said that she would definitely look for books that may help him. Nox was glad that everything was so wonderful because this is exactly what he sought from Jitri. The guy suddenly was distracted as he heard some strange noise and screams from the side. Someone shouted on the street that they would not seem enough for them all if they would ruin something in preparation. Nox heard that after the release, the young Mr. Grain returned from the academy. In general, he already forgot about such a great event, and on the street there was a noise due to the hustle and bustle related to preparation. Nox realized that his chance was his chance to extend his life, and it was great news. The young gentleman informed Jitri that apparently he would need to leave right now. Jitri was sure that the young Mr. Nox was already definitely planning something. The head of the family congratulated his son on the end of the Academy Eldane, because this was a good achievement. Grain von Reinhofer was glad to hear these congratulations and praise from his father. This guy was the second son of Theo and was also one of the elder brothers Nox. Nox turned to his abilities and saw that the owner was the owner of darkness and he had no passive skill. However, Grain activated the skill of true motives. The guy believed that Grain was those who bloom as soon as a real woman appears in sight. This man still possessed strong hypocrisy and arrogance. The Nox was sure that the only reason why such a Gwen's nature was yet revealed, it was the use of Nox was even worse. The young master knew that in the society of politicians and talk about the helpless brother of the Grain felt like a fish in water. The Grain is using the ability to manage politicians and was able to successfully finish the academy. Eldane was certainly a very famous academy, but she was the task of ending her with an asterisk. He knew that the upcoming entrance exams would be able to pass less than 1,000 people who wish and would be able to release it all at best half. The head decided to ask whether the exact date of departure to Chaders was already known. Grain replied that he already knew everything and said that he was going south to Chaders in 3 days. The chapter suggested that just at this time of the year, most likely, the Gran would wait for the monsters hunting. Chaders was known to many as an independent territory in the south that bordered the possessions of the Reinhofer. The eastern neighbor Chaders was Tajalin, which limits the desert. It was dangerous in that territory not only because of the drought, but also because of the huge number of monsters that the whole desert were reminded. As a result, the imperial family received the grade to get rid of the monsters who tormented Chaders. The law of the Akam Empire stated that it was necessary to fulfill the first mission on behalf of the emperor in order to be awarded the title of knight, approved by the imperial family, by the most imperial family. It was known that with the advent of winter Chaders filled different monsters. Grain decided that apparently the imperial family decided to take measures to solve the problem. The chapter believed that until their land is barren, other territories from this suffer no less. The man told his son that he would in no way think about disgracing the honor of the Reinhof's family. Grain replied that these words from this moment would simply become his motto in life. Nox believed that the mission to Chaders was not just hunting for monsters. He believed that this is not ordinary outside the plot scene, because this location will more than once appear in the main storyline. That is why the young Mr. Nox hoped to get a lot from her. Nox decided to clarify and asked his brother whether he was really leaving for Chaders in the near future. The young gentleman, only for his benefit, asked Grain to take him with him. To himself, he thought that he still had to personally participate in the conquest of Chaders. Grain has not yet answered anything, but the guy on his face has already written what he thinks about this. In a rumor, the guy decided to say that his younger brother has no idea what he was asking and has no idea about Chaders. Nox replied that he had already heard that this was a neutral territory that was defeated by the systematic attacks of monsters. He also knew that this is a favorite place for sheltering various criminal groups. Grain said that recently the name of his younger brother was often in hearing. He wanted to know whether the truth was that the Nox was able to study the forest of missing children, along with the second daughter of styling. Nox saw that this ability helps the the grade easily determine the motives of a person if the indicators of statistics are lower than his. To say it is easier, then it was precisely this skill of Grain's that he cleared his way to the world of political games. Grain also remembered the guy's victory over the twins and that the Nox sheltered an ordinary maid. In response, Nox replied that everything is so and activated the skill of a cold mind to resist the true motives. The older brother said that the Nox was largely able to succeed in recently. However, Grain believed that he couldn't even take Nox, who had not even graduated from the Academy Eldane, with him for a mission. The guy argued all the fact that he did not want to answer then, that he would go to the next world in his arms. The head decided to take this situation into his own hands and confidently said that he believes that nothing like this would happen. The man no longer asked, but ordered the grade to take with him to the mission of his younger brother. Grain could not believe that his father speaks now seriously because he could not even suggest something like that. The head of the family immediately acquired a serious expression and said that this is an order that was not subject to discussion. The man told them too that their family would provide everything necessary to complete this assignment and ordered his sons to prepare for departure in 3 days. Nox tried to understand what just happened and how his father could let him go so easily. Nox was practically sure that Theo had already planned something, just did not know what exactly. Grain did not understand what his younger brother was doing at all and what he was achieving, but he believed that this was all clearly not normal. Nox believed that no matter how it all now seemed to be abnormal, but in his opinion, it is clearly better than him, the former. Grain did not appreciate the joke of his younger brother and ordered him to follow what he does and what he says. After all, he believed that it would be very annoying if the Nox suddenly suffers right before a trip to charts. Suddenly, unexpectedly for them, someone knocked over a glass and thereby attracted the attention of both brothers. This man was Jitri, who immediately began to try to eliminate traces of his clumsiness. The girl at the same moment asked for forgiveness from the young Mr. Nox and asked the guy with her to his room so that she could wash and fix everything. The Nox, let's say so formally, apologized to the grave and said that his maid was guilty. The guy added that because of this mistake, he was forced to leave his older brother. Nox was already leaving, told the grave that they would definitely see himself, and he is looking forward to when he will go together in 3 days to conquer Chaders. Grain could no longer hide his irritation and obvious anger for such the impudence of his younger brother. When the Nox was already left alone with his maid, he immediately said thanks, because thanks to him he managed to avoid unnecessary troubles. The girl believed that the guy had a direct talent to find problems out of the blue. Jitri was just not fully sure of the correctness of the trip to Chaders. Nox said that the girl has nothing to worry about because everything will be in order with him. Not having time to enter his room on the guy, immediately flew Rona, who was outraged that the young Mr. Nox was already gathered somewhere. The guy noticed that the girl became completely free to feel, and he did not like it. Nox simply answered that everything was already decided, and he did not understand that it was so amazing that he wished to join the mission in Chaders. Jitri too did not become silent and said that at the moment she completely agrees with Rona. The girl simply thought that Chaders was too dangerous. After all, many were known to many that he was simply teeming with all kinds of monsters and criminal gangs. Nox thought that this was just an ideal chance for him to extend his life. In a rumor answered that I was perfectly notified about everything. The guy warned both girls that he was going to conquer Charters without them, and they are left on the estate. Jitty immediately answered that it is simply unacceptable for her, and she categorically disagreed with this decision of the young master categorically. The girl believed that as a maid of Mr. Nox, she simply obliged to help him wherever he was, and therefore she believes that she should go with him. The guy decided to immediately warn the girl that she could get seriously in that territory. Jitri believed that this applies to the young master because she heard many times what the weak and forever ill. She believed that the young gentleman simply could not cope without her, and since the trip would be so far away, the girl mentioned that Nox constantly forgot his things and someone would have to wash his clothes. Jitri just knew that all this as a young Lord Nox himself would not do, and therefore she was sure that he would simply be needed. Nox thought and realized that the girl was completely right, and he just did not even have to think about such trivial concerns during the game. The guy thought about the fact that if he suddenly goes to the next world, then the position of Jitri in the family of the Rinhafers will shake. He understood that apparently, and the girl also had no choice, and she can only follow him, and therefore answered Jitri that she agreed. However, the guy decided to immediately warn that she would be obliged to obey him, and besides, she would need to learn how to ride. Jitri replied that she understood everything, and besides the girl was already more or less made friends with Carl. Rona, as soon as she heard Carl, could not hide her surprise. Rona tried to understand how Jitri managed to get along with Carl, to which the girl replied that she spent half of her salary on high-quality cubes of horses, and Carl's joy opened her. Now Rona realized her mistake because she had been trying to feed the animal with hay all this time. The girl also realized that Carl was exactly the same as his master. Nox emphasized that Rona still remains in the estate and Jitri will be so helped. The guy in this case ordered the girl to do preparations. The guy could not miss by how Ron was worried about him, and he was very hoping that everything would be in order with her. The senior butler who reported that the head wanted to convey something to the young Mr. Knox prevented their conversations. Knox did not expect this and did not even know what exactly Theo wishes to convey to him. The guy remembered the words of the chapter that he would provide everything necessary to complete the task, and apparently it will be now. However, he still could not understand why Theo suddenly took his side at dinner. Most likely he planned something. The head finally waited for his youngest son and was looking forward to handing the guy to the guy's conceived. Knox greeted how the head of the family should be and said that he arrived as soon as he could. The man pointed to one relic and spoke whether she would belong to him only on himself. The guy could not hide his surprise when he saw what exactly was being said. Knox did not expect to see a sword of the Ruinhafer family. For the guy, all this was extremely unexpected because during his game of Inner, the lunatic was never mentioned. He considered himself very scrupulous, which turned his attention to absolutely everything. Well, it was also possible to take into account the fact that the guy went through this game from beginning to end 27 times. And did not know about him. However, the Knox could not understand why it suddenly Theo decided to transmit this sword to him. Knox decided for himself that let him not understand the motives of the chapter now, but despite this, he must definitely touch this sword. The chapter said that outwardly this sword looks slightly battered, however it should not pay attention to it. The man said that it was this sword that accompanied the ancestor throughout his life. The head of the family also spoke that this sword was still with him, but it has nothing to do with it. The guy asked the chapter to tell him what exactly needs to be done to get him. The man replied that the guy just needs to take this sword in his hands, that the young Mr. Knox hastened to do. After Knox took this sword in his hands, something strange began to happen immediately. The guy only a few minutes later realized that this weapon began to absorb. The guy turned his attention to the fact that the color of the blade suddenly changed, but what it meant he did not know. The head saw that the young Mr. Knox had already begun to master, and in principle he expected something like that. The man, because of his age, and most importantly, foresaw all this in advance. He told the guy that this sword absorbs the owner of the owner, and after that emits her several times more powerful. Knox received a system notification that his mana is very quickly absorbed, and in connection with this skill, acting is unstable. The guy understood that he would have big problems if the sword would continue to absorb Manu at such a speed. The head told the guy that if he wants to get a sword, he needs to hold out in such a rack for 10 minutes without letting him out of his hands. The guy did not expect such a task and did not imagine how to withstand these 10 minutes in this state. The head decided to inform the young Mr. Knox the name of this sword, and it was a Thunderer.